Chapter 1773. Who had an easy life in this world? Having a proper and stable job, even if it was manual labor, was also a form of hope for the people.
Jiang,
Ji said, not everyone can afford a carriage. I think no one will object to it if it's a convenient way to travel. Xiangyang City was so big and the people had a good standard of living. The carriage driver didn't have to worry about business. Zhang Ping relaxed his brows and said, My lord's thoughts are for the people. This is a great deed. I will do my best to make this thing.
Jiang,
Ji said, we have to make a bicycle too. She wanted to take Xiaoyu for a ride. Speaking of which, she was one of the higher-ups of the Federation's military after all. She had a few modified sports cars in her garage, and she even had a display stand for the mecha hub of the combat mecha. In the end, she had to rely on a bicycle to flirt with a man and go for a ride. Zhang Ping asked curiously, My lord calls it a bicycle. It should be a car, but I don't know how to use it. Jiang? Ji said, sit on the seat with your legs apart and step on the pedals. Zhang Ping. He didn't know if he should question whether he would be unable to stand or that this position was too immoral. When he thought about how riding this thing was equivalent to holding something between his legs in broad daylight, it was really unsightly.
Jiang,
Ji saw that he didn't speak and asked, Is there anything wrong? Zhang Ping smiled awkwardly but politely. There's nothing wrong. Then it's settled. I'll wait for your good news.
Jiang,
Ji was now a person with a big family business. If there was anything, she could just instruct her subordinates to do it. She only needed to steer the ship. Oh yes, since Xueqi is pregnant and her body isn't as good as before, don't let her touch latex in case it harms the fetus. Ji changed the topic and said, let her look at the blueprint of the bicycle. I remember that she's most interested in this kind of thing. Zhang Ping was about to thank her. He opened his mouth but Jiang? Ji did this to him. He thought that his lord pitied the pregnant woman and wanted to give Xueqi paid maternity leave. In the end, she let her work on a new project while she was pregnant? That was a pregnant woman. Pregnant women were also people. As long as the intensity of labor was not excessive, Jiang? Ji would not even let pregnant women off. What could Zhang Ping say? Of course, he revealed a stiff smile and accepted the order on behalf of Bai Xueqi. She thought that Bai Xueqi didn't have the energy to do it, but when Zhang Ping handed the blueprint to her, she almost jumped up from the mat with her big belly. Zhang Ping hurriedly supported her, looking frightened. Take it easy, take it easy. Don't stretch your stomach. Bai Xueqi gently slapped his right hand away. The stomach is on my body. I didn't say anything, but your reaction is even bigger than mine. Zhang Ping smiled bitterly. I just can't bear to see you too tired. Bai Xueqi said, How can there be any reason to neglect a task entrusted to me by the Lord? I'm in good health, and the one in my stomach doesn't dare to disturb me. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's drawing was very detailed. At the end, there was even a diagram of each part. Bai Xueqi took a closer look, and the more she looked, the more amazed she became. His lord was really a Mahist genius who had been held back by fighting for the world. At the same time, some people sighed with emotion. Ji was a designer who was held back by Seize the Throne. My lord, the samples have been delivered. They are waiting inside. Ginger? After leaving the woodworking workshop, he bumped into Wei Ci on his way back. She asked, What kind of clothes? Wei Ci replied, Didn't the Lord hand over the finished drawings to the embroiderer to cut paper for the graduation clothes? The samples have been made in a hurry. Ginger? Ji slapped her head. She had almost forgotten about this matter. Let's go and see what it looks like. Ginger? Ji's drawings had been modified by Wei Ci. Her drawing skills were more suitable for drawing mechanical drawings, and Wei Ci was good at other things. She was looking forward to seeing what the final product would look like. The elderly embroiderer and tailor were given to Ginger. Ji bowed respectfully before bringing the neatly folded samples over. Ginger? Ji said, Why don't you let someone wear it to see how it looks? What would it look like if it was folded? The tailor said, This old servant doesn't dare to. How can this old servant try on the clothes of the nobles? Usually, the clothes that they made were directly worn by the nobles. They would never let the nobles wear them after they had tried them on. The clothes had to be new, not second-hand. Ginger? Ji said, Fine, I'll find 2 people to try. The clothes have to be worn to know what's wrong with them. The embroidery of the clothes was done by the embroiderer. It was neat and meticulous, and the overall effect of the clothes was the same as Ginger? Ji had imagined. No, she let the person who tried it on turn around, only to find that the iron-eating beast emblem on the back of the clothes had been changed. Ginger? Ji had drawn a black and white chibi version of the panda head. It looked very cute, but it did not match the overall style of the clothes. After Xueqi's modifications, the original cute chibi style turned into a noble, cool, and indifferent style. The panda head was drawn with black silk threads. At first glance, it looked like an unfamiliar word, but upon closer inspection, one could see that it was the head of the iron-eating beast. The head was surrounded by a circle, and there were a total of 8 meandering lines in all directions, like willow leaves and burning tongues of fire. Ginger? Ji smiled and said, "Not bad." Xueqi had previously said that he wanted to make a small change to the emblem. Ji was busy and did not ask in detail how to make the change, and let him do it. Experts could tell once they made a move, and they were much more professional than her. Xueqi lowered his head and smiled bitterly. Could he say that this emblem was the royal emblem of the Jiang royal family in the previous life? Back then, His Majesty also wanted to use the iron-eating beast as the emblem, but the drawing was not very good. A few important ministers made several changes before the current version was achieved. This emblem was in the center of the back. It was not big, and the size was only a circle formed by the thumb and index finger. It was not very eye-catching, but it could not be ignored. I am very satisfied with the sample, and the finished clothes will be made according to this. Jiang Ji smiled and said to everyone, "The senior students of the Golden Scale Academy have also resumed school. Follow my orders and go to the academy to make the clothes for the students. They must be well-fitting, so that they will look energetic when wearing them." There were only slightly more than 200 students graduating in the first batch, so there was still time to make the clothes. This was the first batch, so there was no experience. If it was the next batch of students, the graduation clothes would have to be prepared a long time in advance. The clothes are ready. Has the Lord thought about what questions to test them? Jiang Ji said, "Why do I have to set a question too?" Xueqi said, "After all, this is the first batch. If the Lord values them, the outside world will naturally value them more." "That makes sense, then let me think." Jiang Ji rolled her eyes and smiled. Ji Yunshu rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "What a coincidence, I have it." "Ready-made? Sugarcane and rubber trees, aren't they ready-made?" Jiang Ji, when Ji was in school, every examination paper was closely related to current affairs. This detail tells us that students should also develop the habit of being concerned about the affairs of the outside world. Chapter 1774. My lord, I think that sugarcane and rubber trees are not suitable for the exam. It's unfair. These 2 things have yet to be spread. Except for the children of a few important ministers, the other students are all commoners. How would they know about these things? Xueqi voted against it. The information channels were not equal. It was obviously unfair to the students who came from ordinary backgrounds to use these 2 questions as the exam questions. Whether it was sugarcane or rubber trees, they belonged to unconventional topics that very few people knew about. Even Feng Jin, who was unprepared, might not be able to answer the exam questions, let alone a group of students. His lord's exam questions were not only beyond the syllabus, but they were also fatal. Zhang Pengji could not help but laugh. Although Zixiao's considerations are thorough, he's too cautious. I used this as the exam questions. Naturally, I won't let those kids have the possibility of cheating. The exam questions can briefly mention the functions of sugarcane and rubber trees, as well as their future applications. They can reveal key information, and the students can analyze and judge based on this information. I'm very curious. If I ask the students about the benefits of promoting these 2 things, can they dig deeper into the meaning and understand my intentions? If the exam was like that, Feng Yi and the others would lose their advantage because Zhang Pengji had forcefully leveled the information. Zhang Pengji said, "The graduation exam is not difficult for these students. There won't be the phenomenon of failing the exam and repeating a year, but I don't need talents who only know how to read from the book." The exam system of the Golden Scale Academy was quite strict. Zhang Pengji had seen the students' past performance. Graduation was definitely not a problem. Xueqi thought for a while.
My lord is right, but I still have something to say.
Say it.
What can't you say directly between us? Xueqi said hesitantly. It's a waste to give two questions at once. Why don't you give one and leave one?
Leave one?
Why leave it?
My lord, have you forgotten?
Although the Academy's graduation examination is important, it is only a minor examination within the Academy. The major examination for your selection of scholars is still to come. Xueqi reminded her. She had asked two important questions at once. What would the imperial examination test be about? Jiang Pengji said with a smile, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. I'll give one of the questions and leave the other one for later. The two joked and decided on a major question that the students would never forget. Many years later, there were still many students who dreamed that they were sitting in the examination hall for their graduation exams. That was not scary. What was scary was the last question. It was the nightmare of nightmares. According to the original plan, the graduation examination would be held at the end of the first month after the new year, but due to insufficient preparations, it could only be delayed by a month. The group of students did not feel relieved. Instead, they became even more anxious. As the time for the assessment approached, everyone felt as if they were about to be executed. The nervous atmosphere of the senior students also infected the students of the other years, and they looked at their seniors with sympathy. The students, who felt a sense of crisis, exploded with unprecedented enthusiasm for learning. Although it was still a long time before their assessment, they had to make ample preparations so that they wouldn't be flustered in the future. There were also students who applied to participate in the graduation assessment together with the senior students, but their results would not be included in the final ranking. Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, was one of them. He wanted to see how far he was from the senior students so that he could accumulate experience for the graduation exam in a few years. On this day, Han Yu was at home on a break. He was giving special attention to his eldest son, helping him find out what he missed out. His illegitimate son and daughter were studying hard at the desk not far away. The youngest son, Han Qi, was also sitting, shaking his head while memorizing the beginner's books. At this time, an uninvited guest came to the house. Han Run was hard at work when he caught a glimpse of a silhouette from the corner of his eye.
Father, the housekeeper is here.
Han Run thought the old housekeeper had something important to report, so he didn't dare to delay. Han Yu frowned and turned to ask,
What's the matter?
The old housekeeper looked embarrassed.
Master, there is a guest visiting.
Who is it? Why didn't you give me a visiting card? It was rare for Han Yu to have a day off. He declined many invitations from his friends and specially stayed at home to help with the children's homework. He didn't want to see an uninvited guest without a visiting card. The old housekeeper's eyes fell on Han Run and the young Han Qi. He wanted to say something but stopped. Han Yu understood. The uninvited guest, who was related to the two sons, seemed to be the one from Shangyang County. Who was it? Of course it was Madame Tao, who had divorced Han Yu a few years ago. For the sake of the two sons, Han Yu didn't get angry. He asked calmly, What is she doing here? Madame Tao's maiden family was destroyed by the Lord. Madame Tao escaped as a married daughter. Later, her eldest son, Han Run, settled her in a private house in Shangyang County. Since the two of them divorced, Han Yu hadn't paid attention to Madame Tao's recent situation. He didn't understand the purpose of her visit. The old housekeeper said, I heard that. She seems to be pregnant. She specially came to see you two Langjuns. Han Yu was stunned for a moment before he realized that Madame Tao was going to remarry. Then I'll have to congratulate her. Han Yu's reaction was still calm when he heard that his ex-wife was going to remarry. If they divorced, they wouldn't be husband and wife anymore. They weren't very old, so it was normal for them to have a second love. Han Yu didn't have any opinion on his ex-wife remarrying. Han Run, who was beside him, bit his lower lip. His hand that was holding the brush trembled slightly. Han Yu could accept it without any grudge, but he couldn't. After several years of separation, the former husband and wife didn't have the sharp and tit-for-tat attitude they used to have. Madame Tao looked at Han Yu, who was sitting upright, and a trace of absent-mindedness flashed in her eyes. She had been depressed all these years and looked like she had aged more than 10 years. Han Yu, on the other hand, did not show any signs of aging. His temperament had become more and more condensed, as if he was the essence that had been accumulated over the years.
People could not help but sigh at the favoritism of God. If she had not been so stubborn in the past, perhaps she would still be the high and mighty Madame Han now.
Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. Madame Tao would not change her choice even if she had another chance. Between her husband, her son and her family, she would always choose the latter. Of course, Madame Tao didn't come here today to renew her relationship with her ex-husband. She knew Han Yu's temperament. If he chose to give up, he wouldn't be reluctant to leave. He wouldn't look back. She wouldn't ask for trouble. The two of them calmly exchanged greetings. Madame Tao was concerned about the studies of her eldest son, Han Run, and the health of her youngest son. Han Yu answered all of them. Han Yu was a smart man, and Madame Tao was not good at hiding her intentions. Han Yu knew that Madame Tao was here for something. He pretended not to know. Seeing that time passed, Madame Tao was a little anxious before the topic got to the point. She had no choice but to state the purpose of this trip, but it was a little tactful. But, no matter how tactful she couldn't change the purpose of probing the graduation exam. Han Yu frowned slightly and pursed his lips without saying a word. His eldest son, Han Run, said, "Mother, the exam questions are confidential. I heard that the exam question bank was made by several great scholars in secret, and the exam questions were selected by Master Lanting. No one knows the content of the exam." How did father know? Chapter 1775. Madame Tao said straightforwardly, "It's just a school exam in the academy. It's not a big deal. How can your father not know?" It all depended on whether the other party had the heart to know. Han Yu frowned. Han Run said, "My father's future is important. How can he participate in fraud? Most of these students are going to be officials. It's still unknown what their future achievements will be. If my father is tainted with the scandal of fraud, there will be hundreds of potential political enemies." Madame Tao felt sad when she saw her son was so supportive of his father. Her son crawled out of her womb, but he stuck to his father. She had doted on him for so many years in vain. Han Run asked her disappointedly, "Mother, did you come all the way here just to ask about this?" Madame Tao looked a bit unnatural. Han Run asked again, "Mother, it has nothing to do with the graduation exam of the Golden Scale Academy. Why do you care about this?" Madame Tao said, "I heard that my son is also going to join the exam. How can it be nothing to do with me?" The implication was that she came for her son, Han Run. Han Run sighed secretly and said, "Mother, you should know that I am not young enough and my knowledge is not as good as the seniors in the senior grade. This exam is just to see how good I am. No matter how I do, the results are not counted. It's meaningless to leak the questions to my son." Han Run knew that his mother was lying. Madame Tao saw that there was no result. She had to skip the topic and briefly said that she was going to remarry in a few months. She thought that Han Yu would be ashamed or embarrassed, but he didn't even frown. He only said, "Congratulations." Han Run also said, "Congratulations, mother, on your second marriage." The young and chubby Han Chi blinked his eyes. The little chubby boy with red lips and white teeth also chuckled and imitated his brother's words. "Congratulations, mother, on your marriage." The little boy didn't know what had happened. When Han Yu and Madame Tao got divorced, the little guy was still ignorant. Now he didn't know that his words had stabbed his mother's bloody heart. Madame Tao was so ashamed that she covered her face and ran away. Han Run couldn't bear it and turned to look at his father. Han Yu thought for a while and said, "Check the family she remarried into. This question is most likely related to her future husband's family." Sure enough, they found something. The family that Mrs. Tao remarried into was also a gentry family. Her family status was not as high as Han Yu's, but it was still a good choice. Her remarried husband had a legitimate son left behind by his deceased wife. This legitimate son was also a student who was about to graduate. However, the other party was a transfer student at a later stage. Because he still had a sense of disdain in his bones, he thought that the Golden Scale Academy, a grassroots organization, could not compare to his family's school. He did not study seriously in the first 2 years. Later on, when he woke up and wanted to study hard, he couldn't keep up with his studies. The graduation exam was too noisy. He was afraid that he wouldn't do well in the exam. Coincidentally, his stepmother was Han Yu's ex-wife. The father and son planned to get in through the back door. Han Run looked at the results of the investigation and remained silent for a long time.
Mother, you met the wrong person. Even a blind man would know that the Duke of Lanting valued this examination.
If there was a scandal of cheating in the examination and leaking the examination questions, wouldn't it be a slap to her face? What happened to the opponents who had once made her unhappy?
The weeds on his grave were 3 feet high.
If they found out that Han Yu was the one who leaked the questions, it would mean that the Master of Lanting was a bad judge of character. It would be the same as slapping her. At that time, no one could predict how angry the Lanting Guild would be and how they would retaliate. None of the people involved would be spared, including Madame Tao. That was courting death. Han Yu took a sip of tea. Everyone has their own fate. Han Run felt a little sullen for no reason. He asked his father, "Father, have you ever thought about remarrying?" His mother had already remarried. He couldn't force his father to remarry, could he? Han Run was a little angry when he said that. After all, it was not good for him to have a stepmother and a stepsister. Han Yu said, "When Qi is a little older." He didn't remarry because he considered the situation of his 2 sons, especially his youngest son, Han Qi, who was still too young. If he had remarried not long after his divorce, he couldn't guarantee the character of his new wife.
As a man, he couldn't meddle in the affairs of the house.
He was worried that his youngest son would be wronged. According to Han Yu's plan, he would at least wait until Han Qi was older and could go to the Golden Scale Academy before he could consider remarrying. He couldn't not remarry. Every family had their own relationships. The housekeeper was not omnipotent. Many social engagements required the personal presence of the master. Moreover, all the children in the house were unmarried. Their marriages still needed their legal mother to manage. Even for this reason, Han Yu would remarry at the right time. Now, remarrying would affect his work efficiency. Why would he need a woman if he was obsessed with work? Similar situations were happening in every family. Everyone was secretly trying to get the exam questions. They didn't know that their tricks were nothing in front of Jiang Pengji. As a person from the future, how could she not pay attention to cheating in exams? Even in this era, she still had a set of rather detailed security measures. These scumbags who were still in the early stages of cheating wanted to leak the questions? It was better to daydream before it got dark. They were not the only ones who were concerned about the exam papers. The salted fish in the streaming room were also concerned. Fugue Do. Speaking of which, you are drawing lots so casually. I suddenly feel sorry for the students. Waha mineral water. Streamer, you are too casual. The candidates will cry if they know the truth. Jiang Pengji received the question bank from the scholars of the Golden Scale Academy. She was too lazy to look through them one by one. She just drew lots. Faced with the complaints of the salted fish, Jiang Pengji said seriously, "It's just a small exam for more than 200 people. It's not the federal comprehensive exam. How can it be considered casual?" The Federation Army commander personally came to draw the questions. In a sense, the standard is much higher than the comprehensive examination. The federal comprehensive exam that Jiang Pengji mentioned was similar to the college entrance examination that the audience knew. However, there were still differences between the two. The federal implemented 20 years of compulsory education, which was equivalent to elementary school, junior high school, and university in the salted fish dimension. 20 years of compulsory education was free. Students could graduate and enter society after receiving their graduation certificate. The so-called comprehensive exam was the federal exam after 20 years of compulsory education. Students who had good enough grades and didn't want to enter society at this age could participate in the comprehensive exam at their own expense. Those who passed the comprehensive exam could enter the most prestigious university in the Federation. It was difficult to enter such a university, and even more difficult to leave. The elimination rate was as high as 60%. Those who could survive were the best of the best. The comprehensive exam was so important that they might not be able to invite the head of the army to attend. A small graduation exam of the Golden Scale Academy could make her do it. How could it be considered casual? As she spoke, Jiang Pengji's sharp eyes saw a mass of black and white slowly crawling toward her. She conveniently threw the freshly made exam paper aside. "Yo, mama's darling. Give me a kiss, where's your daddy?" Chapter 1776. Delulu, I don't know if I should be envious that the host has a panda, or envious that the host can kiss the panda Xueqi. Cosimo who loves climbing trees. We're all adults. Of course we're both envious. While the salted fishes were chatting and gossiping, there were also newbies in the live stream room who raised questions. Exodus. I've long heard of such a live streaming room. Although it's my first time getting a seat, I did a lot of homework before coming. If I remember correctly, the host got this panda during the battle against Meng Zhan, didn't she? How many years has it been? Why hasn't young Master Panda grown up yet? I'm a fan of young Master and have always been looking forward to young Master sweeping the weaklings. Or did he change to another one? According to Baidu, pandas have an average lifespan of about 25 years. It had been 7 or 8 years since the panda in Jiang Pengji's hands first appeared, but it was still in the form of a cub. Fairy Queen's Crimson. Upstairs, young Master hasn't changed at all. It's just that he hasn't grown up. Even though every panda looked exactly the same in the eyes of outsiders, veteran panda fans were able to distinguish the names of every panda like they were their family treasures. This young panda cub was the #1 online celebrity among pandas, so of course, she was no exception. They were very sure that the panda had never changed. It had always been the same one, but they didn't know why it didn't grow bigger. Of course, there were advantages to not growing up. Pandas were the cutest when they were a few months old. Jiang Pengji answered Salted Fish's question with a smile. It can't grow big. Maybe it has become a spirit. This explanation immediately provoked the Salted Fishes to denounce and ridicule him. Fugue Do. After the founding of the People's Republic, animals are not allowed to become spirits. Arctic Ocean Soda. The laws of the heavenly Tao here can restrain a panda from another plane? Of course not. So this panda must have become a spirit. Wawan Minran. Speaking of which, if this little guy transforms into a human form, wouldn't she be the first female panda emperor? I think this is a good joke. Can anyone draw a picture of the officials bowing down to His Majesty the Panda? Ia Qingqiu. The person above must be a new bee who fell into the trap in recent years, right? When His Highness Panda first appeared, the host recognized him as her daughter and jokingly called him young master. Many big hands had already drawn pictures of him. I'll introduce you to a few tentacles. You'll see them when you flip through them. Although the panda did not appear often, it had a lot of fans thanks to the halo of a national treasure. It was a pity that the appearance fee of the young master panda was too high. Jiang Pengji also ran around all year round, so it rarely appeared. Every time it appeared, it was very precious. For the salted fish dimension, pandas were probably the cutest animals that people all over the world liked. Jiang Pengji looked at the comments on the screen and her lips curled into a faint smile. She hugged the little fellow's armpits so that it was level with her line of sight. I've already said that you've become a spirit. Nan, why don't you transform into a human for Mama to see? The panda did not understand and thought that Jiang Pengji was playing with it. She was still whining softly and rubbing her cheeks with her soft and pink paws. She was so adorable that it could make people bleed. Once again, Jiang Pengji felt that having the panda as the clan emblem was the right decision. With such a little guy, she could play with him for an entire afternoon without getting bored. Seeing the ears on its head tremble, Jiang Pengji could not help but feel the itch to pinch them. The little guy sensed something and suddenly raised its paws to hold its head. It tilted its head and looked at Jiang Pengji. It was so surprised that its small mouth opened slightly. At that moment, a bullet screen appeared in the streaming room. Kai Hong Tang. So what if he's adorable? He can't take color photos for the rest of his life. This is where he can never compare to the baby. Jiang Pengji laughed softly in her heart. She hugged the little guy and made it face the screen of the streaming room. She said to the screen, "Baby, open your mouth." The salted fishes were confused. The little guy, who was suddenly carried by Jiang Pengji, was also so confused that its mouth was half open. Who told you that my big baby can only take black and white photos? Look at the little guy's pink tongue. It's so adorable. Salted fishes. After playing with his daughter for a while, her father also followed the sound and came over. Jiang Pengji said, "What kind of father are you? You let your little girl run around? Aren't you afraid that she'll be caught and slaughtered?" Seeing that his lord was carrying a familiar iron-eating beast in her arms, Wei Si's slightly nervous expression relaxed. He regained his composure and a confident smile appeared at the corner of his lips. I'm not afraid even if she gets lost. Who would dare to covet the eldest lady? Iron-eating beasts were ferocious beasts. People feared them more than they loved them. Their impression of them was still limited to their powerful combat power and rapid explosive speed. Other than Wei Ci, not to mention the entire Xiangyang district, even in the entire Wanzhou, there was no other family that raised iron-eating beasts. Wei Ci's iron-eating daughter had long become a well-known anecdote. The fact that the little guy had not grown up for so many years had also become a strange story. If someone saw such an iron-eating cub in Wanzhou, there was no doubt that it must be the eldest lady of Wei Ci's family. Wei Ci was the best at stirring up trouble. Did the person who touched Wei Ci's precious baby want to die in a rhythmic manner?
Wei Ci saw the examination paper on the ground from the corner of his eye.
He reached out to pick it up without any hesitation and tidied it up.
This is,
Jiang Pengji said, the examination paper for the Golden Scale Academy's graduation examination. Wei Ci sighed. How can my lord just leave it aside? I don't know how many people are watching it now. Why are they watching it? A few people wanted to do better in the examination, but the majority still wanted to expose a cheating scandal and ruin Jiang Pengji's plans. It was not worth mentioning who these bastards were. Jiang Pengji could not find trouble with them for no reason without catching their tails.
Jiang Pengji said,
So be it. Their eyes are on their faces. Wherever they want to stare, can I stop them? Wei Ci said solemnly, the public's opposition to the graduation examination and the subsequent selection of scholars in the imperial examinations is much greater than expected. The gentry were like a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if Jiang Pengji was very powerful now, the gentry still dared to whisper in private. If the team of novelists led by Wei Ci was Jiang Pengji's mouthpiece to manipulate public opinion, then the circle of celebrities was the mouthpiece of the gentry. The latter's influence was indeed not as great as before, but its prestige still remained. Back then, Jiang Pengji used the Golden Scale Academy's examination method to select scholars. Those who had the opportunity to advance were from humble families and gentry families. This was considered a skirmish. The opposition from the gentry was not loud, and Jiang Pengji's attitude was too unyielding. It was easily suppressed by her. Now, the graduation examination for this batch of Golden Scale Academy students was different. Among the more than 200 students, other than a few who were born in gentry or commoner families, most of them were descendants of commoners who had died in the war. Well, these students were commoners who were of a higher class than commoners. Chapter 1777. In fact, the commoner families could not sit still, but their words carried little weight. The commoner families with weight, such as Qiguanrang and Xueqi, were Zhang Ji's loyal followers. It was impossible for Ji Ye's die-hard loyalists to jump out and sing a different tune. Thus, the voices of the commoners could basically be ignored. At present, the aristocrats were the most vocal. As expected, when interests have nothing to do with them, how many people ignore it? Once it harms their interests, even if it's just a little, they will be anxious and show their ugly side. Zhang Ji sneered, if there's a large-scale fraud scandal in this graduation examination, they will have a reason to attack the Golden Scale Academy and unite against its decision to recruit commoners. Wei Ci sighed in his heart. In his previous life, when the imperial examinations were carried out to select scholars, the aristocrats took advantage of the loopholes in the first batch, and there was a fraud scandal. The aristocrats thought that they could unite to force Her Majesty to change her mind, and even threaten the foundation of the country. In the end, Her Majesty drew her sword and killed people at the Grand Court Conference. She used thunderous methods to massacre a few typical examples. At that time, Wei Ci broke out in a cold sweat for Her Majesty. In the end, Her Majesty did what she was supposed to do. She even used the unborn child in her womb to create the illusion of dystocia, to lure out the Red Lotus group hidden in the dark, and tricked the rebellious aristocrats into taking the opportunity to rebel. The ending was delightful. Her Majesty seized another opportunity to carry the whole scene to the end. Wei Ci was puzzled. Her Majesty had been fishing for many years, but why didn't those aristocrats learn their lesson? They were tricked by her again and again. Not only did they lose their lives, but they also brought disaster to their entire families. Of course, Wei Ci was not qualified to say that, because his son, Wei Tsong, was also a victim of Her Majesty's fishing. Wei Ci was willing to bet that if there was a fraud scandal this time,
If there really is a scandal, what does my lord intend to do?
Jiang?
Ji sneered, killing people justifiably is good. Wei Si smiled bitterly. This was the expected answer. He asked the question that had been puzzling him for a long time. My lord, everything you do is for the sake of 1,000 years, but they repeatedly obstruct you. Is it just because it hurts their interests? Wei Si was also from an aristocrat family, so he could see clearly where the root of the chaos was.
In the general trend of the world, after being united for a long time, it must be divided, and after being divided for a long time, it must be reunited. But under the appearance of separation and reunification were the corpses of millions of people.
Wei Si could not understand the decision of the aristocrats to bury so many innocent lives and the country for their own selfish desires. Of course, Wei Si also knew that not everyone had the selflessness to sacrifice themselves and their families for the sake of the world. For example, himself. Wei Si looked at Zhang Xiang silently. Gee, yes, he also has selfish desires.
Ginger?
Ji said, some people do it purely for their own and family's benefits, while others are purely short-sighted and short-sighted. If these people had my vision and breadth of mind, it might not have been my turn to take this position. Zixiao, don't you think that these people are similar to keyboard warriors? When it had nothing to do with them, they would take the moral high ground and point at the world, playing with their little cleverness, and spew out whatever good words they wanted. Once it involves their own interests, they tend to be vicious and stupid. Wei Si was a little confused. He uttered a question that came from his soul. What is a keyboard warrior? Those who boast that they are the smartest people in tea houses and taverns, giving advice and giving free rein, Zhang Xiang added with a cold smile.
Ji added with a sneer. And those smart aristocrats who like to think they are smart, think they are in control of the whole situation, and should listen to their commands.
In one sentence. You up no cano bb. She was now a vassal, and she was the lord. She knew what the consequences of her actions would be.
Their vision was not as far-sighted as hers, and they still wanted to point fingers at her.
Sooner or later, she would use the god-slaying saber to cut them down. If they don't know what's good for them and really cause trouble for me, creating a scandal of fraud, it will give me a reason to start a massacre.
Zhang Xiang?
Ji looked calm on the surface, but in her heart, she was already sharpening her knife. To her disappointment, this year's aristocrats were too weak. They did not cause any big trouble, and the graduation assessment was carried out as scheduled. Wei Si analyzed the situation and found the reason. Firstly, the current lord was more popular than the emperor in her previous life. She was still in a honeymoon period with the officials, and there weren't as many conflicts as in her previous life. Secondly, with the Golden Scale Pavilion skirmish when it came to selecting a swordsman, everyone was like a frog in warm water. Now that they had medium rare, facing the Golden Scale Pavilion's plus version of selecting a swordsman, although they were hopping and jumping, their little tricks were not effective. Instead, they were suppressed by their lord. Thirdly, and most importantly, the Feng family was now standing on the lord's side. In his past life, it was a few noble families who took the lead in stirring up trouble. Now that the landowning households had a backbone, they were able to work together to stir up trouble. Now that there was no leader, no one dared to be the first bird to take the lead. After being hit by the lord's first wave of energy, they were naturally in a state of disunity. Loose sand could not form a climate. Feng clan. Wei Si glanced at Feng Xiang from the corner of his eye. He sighed in his heart. Comparing the two lives, he pitted Feng Ju even more. If it weren't for fate, the Feng family's path wouldn't have become narrower and narrower. In the end, they would have been frozen by His Majesty for 10 years. It was hard to say whether the new emperor would be willing to use the Feng family. Her Highness Jiang Yan seemed to be open-minded, but she was as vengeful as His Majesty. Before her anger subsided, she would not give the Feng family a good attitude. The prosperity of the landowning households was closely related to the imperial court. The first generation could still have a foothold away from the imperial court, but if the second generation could not recover, it would not be easy to remember again.
Wind.
The big shot sensed something and turned his head to meet Wei Si's gaze. He smiled and nodded, which was considered a greeting. Wei Si struck up a conversation with him. I heard that your son is also participating this year?
Wind.
He said, the eldest son is in this batch, the second son is still a little short of maturity. Both his sons were participating.
Wind.
He was very worried. The eldest son's talent was relatively mediocre, but he was born into the lineage of the leader of the main branch. The second son was fine. He had never planned to debut in this batch. He could fight again even if he did not do well. In contrast, the eldest son was under a lot of pressure. No matter how talented the eldest son of the main branch was, he would inherit the clan in the future. No one could change this. However, young people had strong self-esteem. No one wanted to be unable to convince the masses with their own abilities and become the young clan leader by relying on their reincarnation skills. Xueqi smiled faintly and complimented him.
Wind.
Absent-mindedly he said, "Huai Zhang, do you know the scoring criteria for this assessment?" Not to mention wind? Even the students participating in the assessment did not know. The academy said it was a surprise.
Wind.
The students felt that this was a shock. Where was the joy coming from? Xueqi had an inside story here.
Wind.
Of course he had to continue asking. Anyway, the assessment was about to start. He only asked an hour earlier and it would not affect the students. The 6 arts of a gentleman are rites, music, archery, imperial strategy, mathematics, and calligraphy. There are a total of 6 arts, each worth 30 points, a total of 180 points. In addition to these 6 arts, there is also a miscellaneous exam. The miscellaneous exam is worth 120 points. There is a total of 300 points, and the ranking is based on the number of points. Xueqi lowered his voice. If the total score of a student is less than 180 points, it will be regarded as a failure and will not be able to graduate. This kind of assessment was quite novel. In Xueqi's opinion, there were many differences from his previous life. What is miscellaneous exam? He understood the 6 arts, but he did not understand the miscellaneous exam. Xueqi said, the miscellaneous exam means, anything can be tested. It is not limited to the 6 arts of a gentleman, nor is it categorized. Want to guess the questions? You should just give up on that thought.
Wind.
His heart thumped. He had an ominous premonition. This batch of students. Chapter 1778. Xueqi seemed to see through Feng Gui's worry and comforted him with a smile. All the famous scholars know their limits. The exam questions will not be too difficult for the students. Feng Gui forced a smile. If Xueqi hadn't said that, he wouldn't have been worried. Now that he said that, he felt less confident. The famous scholars of the Golden Scale Academy naturally knew their limits, but the Duke of Lanting, who set the exam questions, was someone who didn't follow the rules. Feng Gui didn't dare to think about the difficulty of the exam this time. Feng Gui was deeply worried, but there were also some heartless fathers, such as Feng Zhan, who could not stop talking. Xueqi wasn't far from him and couldn't help but feel sorry for Feng Yi. Today was Feng Yi's big day. It was good for Feng Zhan to be worried, but why didn't he react at all? Feng Zhan smiled as he took a handful of raisins from the snack plate and said, "What's there to worry about? If he can't pass, he can repeat the exam." Xueqi and Feng Gui were shocked. Was Feng Zhen being serious? Xueqi said, "This is the first batch. It's significant. Failing the exam and having to repeat the exam, aren't you afraid that Rongli won't be able to take the blow?" Although the possibility of this was small, what if something unexpected happened? For example, if he didn't know everything in the exam, or if he guessed wrong. Feng Zhen tilted his head and thought seriously before replying, "If that's the case, repeating the exam is a good thing. If he can't take this blow, what kind of achievements can he make in the future? He might as well continue to stay in the Golden Scale Academy and enjoy its protection, being a fool who only knows how to drop books. Anyway, Madam still has one in her stomach. If Rongli can't make it, then we'll nurture the next one." From a certain perspective, Feng Zhen was a devil with small accounts. He had a strange obsession and fondness for new accounts, but he was not interested in old accounts that he had already raised. He was a classic case of forgetting his old love with a new love. How could Feng Yi be more likable than an unborn son? As soon as he said this, Feng Gui noticed that his second brother, who was a few seats away, suddenly turned his head and stared at Feng Zhen with his death stare. Feng Gui was stunned. He then remembered that Feng Zhen's eldest son, Feng Yi, was his second brother's future son-in-law. If Feng Yi didn't do well, not only would he lose face for Feng Zhen, He would also lose face for Feng Jin. Feng Jin was a misogynist. He wouldn't tolerate his daughter marrying poorly. Feng Zhan sensed something and followed his intuition to look over. Coincidentally, his eyes met Feng Jin's death stare. He laughed awkwardly and said, "Rongli is talented and attentive to the assessment. Not to mention the top 3, but the top 10 is definitely not a problem." Wei Ci saw that Feng Zhan had no backbone and could not help but secretly give him a kick. Noticing that Feng Jin's gaze had become even more unfriendly, Feng Zhan kept a smile on his face, but he was cursing in his heart. He wanted to beat Wei Ci to death with the soles of his shoes. He unilaterally announced that he had completely severed all ties with Wei Ci, his friend who had a kind face but a wicked heart. This child is born at the right time. I wonder if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Feng Zhan had just sworn an oath to cut all ties with them when he heard Xueqi say to Zhang Ping, who was sitting next to him. Zhang Ping smiled and continued, "How is it a bad thing?" Xueqi said, "This year's students are between 17 and 18 years old. What were we doing at this age?" Zhang Ping fell into deep thought, not knowing how to answer. When their generation reached this age, they naturally began to work hard to make a living, and at the same time they had to study hard. Why was it said that it was difficult to study from a poor family? Precious and profound books were all in the hands of the aristocrats. If you wanted to study, you had to visit them. You might not even have a chance to take a look at the books even if you tried your best to persuade them. Because of the complicated environment, they learned early on how to use what they learned for their own benefit. On the other hand, the students of the Golden Scale Academy had come at a good time. Sometimes thinking about it made one feel jealous. The students of the Golden Scale Academy had been studying for 11 or 12 years. What they worried about the most every day was not where to get books to study or how to manage their family business and make a living. Instead, they worried about how to finish the seemingly endless textbooks and how to finish the homework given by the teachers. The people they interacted with the most were their classmates and teachers. They did not have to worry about making a living, studying, social relationships, or books. The relatively closed environment of the academy allowed the students to maintain a certain degree of innocence and naivety at this age. Even if they were scheming, they walked the path of righteousness and honesty. In front of an old fox, it was as if all their thoughts were written on their faces. Xueqi recalled his past and could not help but feel melancholy. Zhang Ping smiled and said, "These students are indeed not scheming, but not being scheming doesn't mean they are stupid. After leaving the academy and seeing a wider world, they can learn some things on their own without being taught by others. Xiaoyu, you don't have to worry about them. A high EQ could not make up for a low IQ, but a high IQ could make up for a low EQ." Xueqi nodded in agreement. Zhang Ping's words were not unreasonable. While everyone was whispering, the students participating in the assessment arrived at the drill ground one after another. They lined up neatly according to their classes. It was not without reason that the ancestor said, "Clothes make the man." These students did not all have exquisite looks, but the scholarly quality that they had cultivated for more than 10 years, coupled with the blue and white school uniform with wide sleeves and a large cloak, gave them a sense of elegance and beauty. She was satisfied to be obsessed with looks. Because there were more subjects, one day was not enough, but Jiang Pengji said that she had plenty of time. She could take the exams one by one, so she was not in a hurry. The first subjects were horse riding and archery. Each could accumulate 30 points. According to the procedure, Master Yuan Jing, Wan Xian, and Cheng Cheng spoke one after another. Finally, Jiang Pengji spoke last. Jiang Pengji did not waste the students' time. She was concise and to the point, but her words were full of threats. Because this was the first graduation assessment, many influential people were invited to watch. This was not only a stage for them to show the educational results of the Golden Scale Academy to the outside world, but also a stage for them to show themselves. If they did not perform well under such circumstances, Wei Ci and the others broke out in a cold sweat. Was there such a threat to the students? The atmosphere in the military camp is austere. My lord's words made the students even more nervous. How could they not be nervous? This was the drill ground of the military camp, and there were close to 10,000 elites stationed around the drill ground. The imposing aura alone made them feel oppressed, not to mention the fact that there were more than 100 VIPs sitting in the temporarily built stands that were usually heard about but never seen. Not only were there the Duke of Lanting and his important ministers, but there were also famous scholars and some well-known gentry clan leaders. How could they not be stressed when they were taking the exam under their noses? It was very stressful. Chapter 1779. If it was inappropriate, it had to be changed to teach the students practical things. Was this Jiang? The Academy's martial arts masters naturally followed Ji Ye's original instructions. Therefore, the riding taught by the Academy had been improved. The assessment was more in line with the current battle forms. The horse riding test was divided into 5 scoring tasks, each of which was worth 6 points. Ming Heal Wan. To steer the horse so that the bells hanging around the horse's neck and limbs would be in sync. Even if it wasn't a song, it definitely couldn't make any clanking sounds. If the horse could play a more complete song, needless to say, it would be a perfect score. Song of Chasing Water. To let the rider ride the horse steadily on the bumpy road. Similarly, the horse's bells could not be messed up. Passing the monarch's watch. This was a bit of an etiquette test, but it also tested the rider's riding skills. The rider had to drive through the narrow gate and at the same time, salute and pay respect. If he did not do well, points would be deducted. Dancing on the thoroughfare. This was considered an obstacle course. The rider galloped back and forth, accurately performing all kinds of movements according to the examiner's instructions. Chasing birds. This should be considered an actual battle. Accurately driving the prey, making it easy to shoot. The drill ground was large enough to allow 50 students to take the assessment in a group at the same time. The horses used were all relatively docile mares. Some people couldn't help but frown when they realized that the test of the 5 royals was not a chariot but a warhorse. They were more conservative in their bones and worshipped the ancient style. They couldn't quite accept such changes with the times. It's like a bunch of devils dancing wildly. It's so nondescript. A famous scholar who was invited to watch secretly rolled his eyes and whispered to his friend in a low voice. His friend laughed. I heard that this was Duke Lanting's idea. The scholar snorted coldly and was full of disdain. When he saw that the rider was a woman, he was so angry that his beard almost curled up. He kept saying that it was improper for a woman to perform the 5 royals in front of so many people. How could he watch? He couldn't watch. If he wasn't afraid of Jiang, Ji would get angry. He wanted to flick his sleeves and leave. He silently said in his heart, comforting himself to give Jiang some face. If he didn't want to watch, he would close his eyes and ignore. There were many others who had the same thought as this scholar. On the contrary, Feng Zhen and the others watched with great interest. The examinees were divided into groups to draw lots. The first group only had 16 female students. Sun Lan's luck wasn't too good. She was in the first group, and her warhorse was also randomly assigned. Give me some face today. If you do well, I'll buy you a few boxes of horsegrass to reward you. His mouth was mumbling something when he heard the sound of clothes rubbing against each other. He turned his head to look and saw that the girl next door had steadily climbed onto the horse's back. She clamped her legs on the horse's belly, and the horse obediently walked towards the examination hall. Sun Lan's face darkened as she looked at the bare back of the horse. Ginger? Ji Yi was a demon who did not play by the rules. Naturally, she would not let her students have an easy time. Sun Lan almost cried. At least give me a stirrup. Yes, Jiang? Ji Yunshu ordered his men to remove the stirrups from the horses, leaving only the saddle. Understirrups stirrups had only been around for a few years, at least for Li when this guy joined the army, he was used to riding without stirrups. Now that stirrups were popular, the threshold for riding a horse had also been lowered. In order to test the true abilities of his students, Jiang Yushu had made a decision. Ji Yi reasonably removed the stirrups. This not only meant that it was more difficult for the students to ride a horse, but it was also difficult for them to ride it. The only fortunate thing was that this batch of war horses were not big, and they were very docile and obedient. If it were the heavy horses of the heavy cavalry battalion, any one of them would be taller than an adult man. How would these students be able to get on a horse? Feng Zhen looked at Sun Lan's miserable expression and almost laughed himself into convulsions. Zhang Ping was puzzled. I wonder what the Lord's intention is in removing the stirrups? Feng Zhen said mysteriously, Shiheng, you may not know this. If you don't rely on stirrups to get on a horse and ride a horse, your waist is not bad. Zhang Ping. The scene suddenly became dirty. Wei Ci coughed lightly at the side, indicating for this group of old drivers to take it easy. Why were they racing in such a formal setting? Feng Zhan continued to watch and discovered a somewhat strange phenomenon. These children's waists are not good. The way they mounted the horses was different, not at all romantic or elegant. Look at the girls next door. All of them were valiant and heroic. Yes, Feng Zhan discovered that the girls in the girls' class were a bit fierce. The way they mounted the horses was natural and smooth. Not to mention the 5 royals. Just their waists alone were very promising. The more Wei Ci listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. He gestured for Feng Jin to go. Feng Jin continued to cast a death stare at Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen. The first test of riding a horse was Ming and Luan. The war horses' necks and legs were hung with bells. What the students had to do was to control the horses to walk and make their bells ring, trying to make the sounds as rhythmic as possible. If they could play a prescribed tune, the more perfect it was, the better they would get full marks. This test not only tested the horses, but also the students' music theory. Before the test began, the students were given a short period of time to communicate with the horses under them. At the same time, they were given a buffer time to adjust their emotions. Isn't this kind of test unfair to the later students? Some people were doubtful. After all, the first group would be told the songs, so the preparation time was short. However, the later groups would have plenty of time. Continue to watch. The Duke of Lanting wouldn't even consider this. When the music officer played the test tune, everyone was stunned and couldn't help but whisper, "I've never heard of this tune. Brother XX is proficient in music theory. Do you have any impression of it?" Brother XX naturally hadn't heard of it either, because this tune was created by the audience in the salted fish dimension. It was the familiar Christmas song, Jingle Bells. Although the tune was unfamiliar, the rhythm was clear and concise. It was the kind that could get addicted just by listening to it. The music officer played the tune 3 times. The students sat on their horses and silently memorized it, either confidently or solemnly sighing. At the command, the first group of tests began. The Ming and Luan test was special. The first group of 50 people was divided into 5 groups of 10 people. If 50 people performed at the same time, the bells would be too messy and it would be inconvenient to score. Sun Lan nervously grabbed the reins. Beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The rhythm was not very clear, but it was not out of tune either. Jingle Bells was only a short segment. The performance didn't need much time. The scoring criteria were not only limited to the tune, but also depended on whether the person riding the horse's movements were smooth and whether they looked confident. Sun Lan estimated the approximate score in her heart. She couldn't get full marks out of 6, but she could get 4. Sure enough, Ming and Luan are free marks for the female class. Sun Lan rode to the side and watched the performance of the next group. She found that the performance of the 2 female students in the first group was quite outstanding. Not only were their tunes on point, but the horses under them also cooperated smoothly. There was no doubt that they would get full marks. Looking at this performance, they could also get high marks in the next 4 tests. The horse riding test not only depended on one's ability, but also a certain element of luck. After all, the test content had to cooperate with the horses. There was no doubt that the horses under the female students were not only docile but also obedient. Well, it should be said that they were too obedient. Not long after, the test of 50 people ended. Only one of the 16 female students did not get full marks. The reason for not getting full marks was that the tune was out of tune. Of the remaining 34 male students, only 10 of them got full marks. The rest all got 4 to 5 marks. Sun Lan's performance was better than he expected. She actually got 5 marks. The few celebrities who were originally disdainful were also silent. Even though they were still very disdainful, they had to admit that the performance of the female students was perfect and impeccable. Chapter 1780. Whether it's a fluke or not, we'll know once we see the results. Whether it's a donkey or a horse, we'll know once we pull it out. Why jump to conclusions and make ourselves a laughingstock? Feng Zhen suddenly raised his voice and joked with Zhang Ping beside him. Although these words were clearly directed at Zhang Ping, those with ulterior motives didn't think so. Instead, they felt that Feng Zhen was indirectly scolding the locust tree. His words were really sarcastic. They also knew how bad Feng Zhen's reputation was. Arguing with him was pure self-torture. More than one person had this kind of contemptuous thought. Everyone secretly scolded Feng Zhan and cursed Longzi for acting recklessly. His ears were really high. They wanted to hear what else Feng Longzi had to say to belittle them. Zhang Ping was stunned by Feng Zhan's sudden diss, but he immediately reacted. He smiled faintly and bowed in apology. What Zisher said just now was correct.
It was indeed I, Zhang, who was narrow-minded.
Zhang Ping continued Feng Zhan's words, which was equivalent to admitting that Feng Zhan had dissed him just now. The others shouldn't take it personally.
If he really took it to heart, then it could only be said that this person had too many inner dramas, and his imagination was too much.
Hearing Zhang Ping admit that he was narrow-minded, the few people's faces burned. They were embarrassed, annoyed, and angry. Feng Zhan and Zhang Ping were putting on a show to humiliate them. It was outrageous. Adhering to the principle of losing but not losing, they faintly understood the essence of the later generation of contrarians. Regardless of the facts, they could argue from any angle. Thus, Feng Zhan heard someone's soft and low voice. She spoke in a low voice that Feng Zhan could definitely hear. Everyone knows that most women are physically weaker than men, but that doesn't exclude the fact that there are female heroes like the Duke of Lanting, who are born with godly strength. They're just a rarity. However, Xiangyang district has hundreds of thousands of people. It's not difficult to pick 15 or 16 women with excellent physical strength. The words of the contrarians were also very meaningful. For example, these two sentences. Flatter Jiang? Jiang affirmed that she was born with divine strength. At the same time, he said that the 16 women in the first group were elites among women. It was normal for them to perform better than the men. They were placed in the first group to perform Ming and Luan. It was probably a secret operation by the Golden Scale Academy to please Duke Lanting, who was also a woman. At the same time, it was also a good sign. If it wasn't for the under-the-table manipulation, how could 15 out of 16 girls get full marks? It was definitely arranged by the Academy to put the most outstanding girls in the first group. He could understand the intentions of the Golden Scale Academy. After all, the operation of the Academy depended on the Lord of Lanting. If the Lord of Lanting was not happy, how could the Academy continue to operate? However, the Academy was a wise and virtuous place after all. How could they be infected with the bad habit of sucking up to those in power? Tesveske, bowing to power and worldly power is really disgusting. A normal person would not be able to understand the thoughts of a contrarian. They had their own set of perfect logic, and arguing with them was a waste of time. Feng Zhan snorted coldly.
Zhang Pingho smiled and comforted him in a low voice, in case Feng Longzi suddenly went crazy and made a fool of himself, ruining the assessment.
Seeing that Feng Zhan had stopped talking, a smug smile appeared on the man's face. However, he was soon unable to laugh, because a big shot who was even more stubborn than him had jumped out. Feng Ju, who had been watching the show, retracted his gaze from the arena and glanced at the contrarian who had just spoken. Despicable people cause too much trouble.
Wind.
He scolded him in a low voice, telling him not to talk nonsense. Logically, Feng Ju was not qualified to come today, but he was also a well-known scholar. He had also worked for Huang Song against Jiang. Ji's history in the Radiant Light was not light in the circle of scholars. He was invited, but he disliked the other scholars for being too noisy, so he found a way to change his seat and came to accompany his elder brother. Faced with his elder brother's scolding, Feng Ju smiled and said, "What are you afraid of?
The mouth is on you. Even the Lord of Lanting has no reason to shut his little brother up.
Despicable people cause trouble. They can't even say a word or two. How can they do that?" Feng Zhan rolled his eyes and probed, "How can a despicable person be compared to a famous scholar?"
A famous scholar is not necessarily a despicable person, and a despicable person is not necessarily a famous scholar.
Feng Ju shook his head and said, "Those who have high prestige but are not officials are called famous scholars. Those who write books and write theories are called famous scholars. Those who are open-minded and do not care about trifles are also called famous scholars. Although they are all famous scholars, there are different levels. If it's a third party, they don't have to be a genius or come from a noble family. They just need to drink often, make friends with famous people with wine and rare toys, brag, be familiar with the Li Sa, and know 1 or 200 volumes. Then they can be called a famous scholar." The threshold was so low.
The people who joined the circle of scholars had different moral standards. It was hard to guarantee that there were no despicable people. Feng Ju's words were not polite. He was just short of pointing at their noses and scolding them. The few scholars were so angry that they jumped up and down. They endured and endured. Under the comfort of their friends, they did not challenge Feng Zhan or Feng Ju to a duel. Seeing that they were so angry that they were grinding their teeth, Feng Zhan felt happy. He poured a cup of wine and toasted in Feng Ju's direction from afar. Feng Ju smiled and raised his cup in return. The two looked at each other and smiled. They drank the wine in their cups in one go. To this, Dalong Feng? Erlang Feng Jin's feelings were the most complicated. They always felt that Feng Zhan and Feng Ju were like tortoises looking at mung beans. They liked each other and did not know what kind of trouble they would cause in the future. These people were shooting their mouths off.
Jiang.
How could Ji not hear them? Her eyes fell on the drill ground, but her ears perked up to listen to the gossip. The attention of the idle people was also on the students at first, but after watching a few groups of Ming and Luan, the novelty wore off and they began to pay attention to other places. Now, they found that there were people quarreling elsewhere. Tudu Feiqiu, Feng Longzi is a real man, but his words are too strong. Polo Mei Haoqi, little angel Shiheng is the cute one. The way she cooperated with Feng Longzi just now was too spoiled. The host is really something. Little angel Shiheng's appearance rate is too low. As a fan of a small group of idols, she would be moved to tears if she could get candy once every few years. Zhang Ping was one of the 3 giants of the carpentry workshop. He was in charge of logistics, so his appearance rate naturally could not be compared to the frontline personnel who often followed the army. The idle people who were fans of Zhang Ping, Su Ku, and the others were the most pitiful. They could not see their idols for several years, so they could only rely on themselves. For you, a stranger, the world is not straight under a smiley face, angle, under a meow meow. What is not straight in the world?
Spoil what?
Wasn't it said a few days ago that little angel Shiheng was no longer single and had a girlfriend? Although passion, gay love, and Ji's love coexisted in this broadcast room, and it was normal to look at people who were gay, but Jiang? The people around Ji were really straight. The prodigal Feng Zhan had a big sister complex, and the technical geek Zhang Ping had hooked up with by Yuexia. No matter how gay they looked, they were pure colleagues. Seeing that the idle people were about to quarrel again, Feng Ju joined the battlefield and extinguished the budding flame. Chapter 1781. Lan Chue Yubuja. I always thought that being a celebrity was a noble profession. In the end, you can call yourself a celebrity just by reading a few books, being good at socializing, bragging, and marketing. Why do I suddenly feel like a marketing account when you explain it like that? Gue Kai Gua Feng Shao. It's not a marketing account, it's obviously a social butterfly. Tudu Feiqiu. No, it's obviously a social butterfly who runs a marketing account.
Jiang.
Ji glanced at the bullet screen and almost couldn't hold back her laughter. It was true that there were high-quality and cultured people in the celebrity circle, such as Feng Ju, who was really talented, and Zhang Ping in the past. He belonged to the category of people who had a high reputation but did not become an official. However, there were also speculators who used fame and connections as capital to advance their careers. With such an analysis, there was indeed a sense of déjà vu from a marketing account.
Jiang.
Ji had been developing for many years. Those celebrities had often used their fame and connections to diss Jiang.
Ji.
If it wasn't Jiang? Ji had the ability, and Wei Ci was good at controlling public opinion. Maybe her reputation would really be discredited by these celebrities. Why did people say that one should not offend these scholars? Wasn't it because they had pens in their hands and could control public opinion? Once they started to control public opinion, Ji would be defined as a tyrant. In the future, there would be countless people who would discredit her. Don't look down on these celebrities. It was no joke if they united to discredit a person. Listening to Feng Ju's blunt diss, she suddenly understood why she got along with Feng Ju in Wei Ci's previous life. His temper was really to her liking. If she didn't like it, she would argue back. If she couldn't argue back, she would show her fists. She wouldn't suffer any losses. It was nonsense to say that a gentleman's revenge was never too late. If there was enmity, it was the right way to take revenge on the spot. For example,
These girls from the Golden Scale Academy were indeed given to Jiang? Ji fought for a breath of air. If the outstanding performance of the first group of 16 girls was a fluke, then the stable and outstanding performance of the next 3 groups of girls made some contrarians speechless. Those girls' outstanding writing skills were obviously hard work.
Anyone with a discerning eye could see that.
What about those who couldn't tell?
Of course they were blind.
However, as a contrarian, he wouldn't admit defeat easily. What was there to be proud of about Ming and Luan's excellent performance? As long as one put in a lot of effort, they would be able to make it look presentable. This did not mean that these girls were really amazing. Sun Lan's hearing was pretty good, and he was one of the first batch to finish the exam. While watching from the side, he could also pay attention to the people in the stands. What are you thinking about? The third group, Feng Yi, had completed the test and was riding over. There was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead, and his jade-like face was dyed red. The way he rode on the back of the horse made him look even more youthful. As the spring breeze blew, his wide sleeves fluttered in the wind, and his hair ribbon fluttered in the wind. This youth's graceful bearing made him a dazzling existence in the crowd. Sun Lan glanced at her friend and smiled. I'm thinking that those people with loose tongues. Do they think their faces are too thick? That it doesn't hurt to hit them? Feng Yi had a puzzled look on her face as she jumped off the horse. She carefully tidied up her appearance and handed the reins to the groom. The groom had to lead the horse away for the next group of students. What talkative person?
You mean them?
Feng Yi was smart. Even if she didn't hear what the scholars said, she could roughly guess what they were talking about. Sun Lan sighed. The male class lost completely in the horse riding event, but those scholars are still looking for excuses. It makes us even more incompetent. Forcefully maintaining their dignity was the most fatal thing. The senior male students of the Golden Scale Academy had tacitly accepted that they were outclassed in horse riding and archery. But outsiders who didn't understand the situation were still looking for excuses for them. Sun Lan was thin-skinned. The more she listened, the more ashamed she felt. She really wanted to beg them to shut up. Feng Yi smiled. This can't be helped. In their opinion, women are naturally weaker than men. They shouldn't perform so well in horse riding, and archery. Once the facts exceed their expectations, they will naturally find all kinds of excuses to justify their arguments. Unintentionally, Feng Yi understood the nature of the contrarians. Sun Lan said, "But, isn't it known to everyone that the Duke of Lanting met an immortal and was taught a book?" Everyone knew that the Duke of Lanting met an immortal when she was young. The immortal taught her a godly book and taught her how to make up for the 30% yang qi that a woman lacked when she was born. After making up for the lack of yang qi, a woman's physique would be the same as a man's. They couldn't be judged by so-called common sense anymore. Before these celebrities jumped to conclusions, didn't they know about the studies of the girls of the Golden Scale Academy? Regardless of gender, the morning classes were the same. In the afternoon, the men learned horse riding, archery, and swordsmanship, while the women learned needlework, horse riding, archery, and martial arts. The girls learned the same martial arts as the Duke of Lanting. They learned for more than 10 years. If they couldn't fight, then who could? Didn't they know that the male students of the Golden Scale Academy didn't dare to provoke the girls? Feng Yi pondered for a while before coming to a conclusion. There will always be people who don't believe in heresy. Sun Lan said, "That makes sense." While they were talking, Feng Yi's results were also out. His Ming and Luan only had 4 points. 4 points? Didn't they say that Feng Zi was all-powerful? Why didn't he cover up his son's shame? The celebrity who was dissed by Feng Zhan was proud. Feng Zhan bragged about how outstanding his son was every day, but he only got 4 points. His results were below average. Feng Zhan didn't feel embarrassed. He felt embarrassed for the other party. He had been bragging for so many years, and now he was finally going to break. Feng Zhan was very calm and wasn't affected in the slightest. Feng Yi's physique was like his. Performing Ming and Luan required physical and mental strength. The troublemaker even removed the stirrups. It wasn't just difficult. The rider had to use the strength of his waist and legs to control the horse. It was normal that Feng Yi didn't get full marks. Zhang Ping saw his calm expression and was even in the mood to encourage his son with his eyes. He was very curious. His son had embarrassed his father, But Feng Longzi wasn't angry? Feng Zhen rolled his eyes and said, among the 5 royals, Ming and Luan and passing the monarch used the least energy. Rong Li's physique is like mine. Weaker than the average person. If he tried his best in the first section, he could get full marks, but for the song of chasing water, dancing on the thoroughfare, and chasing bird to the left, he wouldn't be able to do it. In this way, the losses outweigh the gains. It's better to play it safe. The 5 royals only got 30 points. If he did well in the other 5, wouldn't his score be pulled back? There's still 180 points for the miscellaneous exam. Why do you care about these 2 points? Hearing this, Zhang Ping sighed. Feng Longzi didn't seem reliable. Previously, he'd been complaining about practicing a smuff and not caring about his eldest son, but he saw it more clearly than anyone else. From this aspect, he seemed to be a good example of a good father. Zhang Ping was going to be a father soon. As a newbie, the shortcut to gaining experience was to learn how other fathers did it. Feng Zhen had a good son. The details of his education would naturally attract Zhang Ping's attention. Looking at it this way, there were indeed merits to be gained. Zhang Ping said, hearing Zisher say this, it makes those talkative people even more laughable and lamentable. Feng Zhen smiled and said, that's true. Otherwise, why would my lord put me in an important position, while they can only jump around? Under smiley face. Angle. Under. Chapter 1782. In the past, Feng Zhen's private life was more dissolute, and he acted like a prodigal son. This made some salted fish dislike him. Salted fish preferred a gentleman like Wei Ci, who was clean and modest, even if he was usually the second male lead. As for Feng Zhen, if he was the male lead in a romance novel, his parents would not recognize him. However, a charming person would eventually attract the attention of others. Feng Zhen was not the male lead in a romance novel. His fans were more rational and knew that one's value could not be judged solely by his private life. Moreover, Feng Zhen's first wife, Feng Yi, died in childbirth. After that, he was single for many years before marrying Wan Xiu'er. During this period, he was a bachelor. As a bachelor, he did not steal, rob, or commit crimes. He only liked to visit women's places, drink wine, and look at mature women to satisfy his physical needs. He did not harm the interests of others, and his conduct was considered righteous. In this way, his dissolute lifestyle was not a big problem for salted fish. Most importantly, after Feng Longzi got married, he focused on his family. Compared to those men who had 3 to 5 concubines after marriage and lived a drunken life, as well as the modern scumbags who had illegitimate children, mistresses, and cheated on their partners, Feng Longzi was simply a good man. This earned Feng Zhen quite a few fans. As an idol with tens of millions of active fans, Feng Zhen's business ability was very strong, and he inadvertently attracted another wave of fans. For example, this time, Feng Zhen, as an ancient person, had a similar open-mindedness and parenting experience to modern people. He was also direct and efficient in his criticism. If one did not become a fan of such an idol, then who would? When Jiang Pengji found that the bullet screen was full of comments related to Feng Zhen, this guy's popularity soared like a rocket. Feng Longzi's mama fan. After following the live stream for so many years, I realized that Feng Longzi is the father with the most modern parenting concept among all the dads. Don't be fooled by his usual lack of style, but outsiders can see that he interacts with his son on an equal footing. He does not use his status as a feudal parent to control everything about his children. Just based on this point, I think many modern parents can't do it. Jiang Pengji secretly nodded at this comment. She did not know why, but almost none of the ministers around her were old-fashioned and pedantic. She had never heard of any family that valued sons over daughters. On second thought, birds of a feather flocked together. This was the personality of the Lord. Of course, the officials who were attracted to her also had something in common. Zinwujiu. The comment above really touched my heart. If you compare Feng Longzi with my parents, I wonder which one is the ancient person and which one is the modern person. My parents' way of educating me was to beat and scold me. When I was young, it was my younger brother who stole 50 cents to buy candy. My parents didn't care about the consequences and beat me with a clothes hanger. They forced me to admit that I was the one who stole it. They beat the clothes hanger until it broke and my body was covered in black and blue marks. Later, when they found out that it was my younger brother, they pretended that nothing had happened. They even said that I was narrow-minded and bore a grudge until now. Feng Longzi is a playboy, but after he has a family, he is a loyal and responsible man. As for my dad, hee. The salted fishes remembered very clearly that Feng Zhen wasn't always right. There were also times when he made mistakes and was disciplined by his son. A patriarch who lived in feudal times could lower his pride and admit his mistake to his son, but their parents stubbornly refused to admit their mistake. Parents couldn't be wrong. Even if they were wrong, children couldn't ask their parents to apologize or challenge their parents' authority. Otherwise, it would be considered unfilial. Penglai umbrella dad. That's true. Feng Longzi did a good job. My grades used to be among the best. Later, because of puberty, weight gain, and being ostracized by my classmates, my grades plummeted. For the first time, my dad was called as a parent by the teacher. He didn't ask anything and directly slapped me 7 or 8 times in the teacher's office. He even kicked me in the stomach and scolded me with all kinds of nasty words. Feng Yi only got 4 out of 6. Feng Longzi analyzed rationally, understood his son, and even rebutted the gossipy old woman. Sigh, they couldn't be compared. Hashtag the heartless world owes a father like Feng Zhen hashtag for a time. Topics related to Feng Zhen rushed to the hot search, causing many netizens to complain about their parents. The most attractive point of this topic was that Feng Zhen, the ancient people, had more open-minded parenting principles than modern parents. Some people said that the generation of parents was uneducated and old-fashioned. How could children be so vengeful? Parents and children were connected by tendons even if their bones were broken. When children were scolded by their parents, it must be because they were at fault. How could they not be filial? These comments were naturally dissed by the salted fish who were reminiscing about the past. Xueqi, even Feng Zhen, a standard ancient person, didn't talk about filial piety all day long. Instead, he said things like, the father is kind and the son is filial, and the father is not kind and the son is not filial. A group of modern people rushed to clean up the filial piety, and even said things like, parents can only understand the painstaking efforts of their parents. These remnants of feudalism should really transmigrate back to be ancient people. Maybe they would be even more famous than they were now. What painstaking efforts? Wasn't it because they had become parents and changed from being controlled to controlling others? Was it because they wanted to maintain the authority of their parents? If they really understood, shouldn't they reflect on themselves? Wrong is wrong, right is right? The salted fish didn't think that parents who stubbornly refused to admit their mistakes could set a good example for their children. Shanyumuxi Mayuzi. Teske, this kind of spicy chicken soup for irresponsible parents to clean up the mess is the most disgusting. For a time, there was a craze on the internet to learn from Feng Zhen, to learn how a feudal man should be a father and a husband. One wouldn't know if they didn't dig, but once they did, they were hooked. Even if Feng Zhen was a middle-aged ancient man in his 40s with a wife and a son, it didn't stop a large number of female fans from following him. Jiang Pengji looked at the grand scene on the bullet screen and looked at Feng Zhen with a teasing gaze. Tsk. How refreshing. A prodigal son that everyone despised could actually become a good father and husband. This is probably the generation gap. A generation gap every 3 years. Based on this calculation, the economic and technological level of this era and the salted fish dimension were many generations apart. At the same time, Feng Zhen didn't know that he had become an internet celebrity in the other 2 dimensions. He said he despised his son, but his body was honest. He sent someone to smuggle some things for his son. Peanut cake. This kind of snack was very cheap for salted fish. One could buy a caddy of it online for more than 20 yuan, but it was rare in this era. Not everyone could afford to eat it. Feng Yi generously shared some with her friends. The graduation exam was a big event for them. Afraid that they would make a mistake during the exam and affect their performance, the students didn't dare to eat too much. Feng Yi was a little hungry after taking the Ming and Luan exam. You can't tolerate hunger. Eat more yourself. They stayed in the crowd and had wide sleeves to hide their faces. Secretly eating something wouldn't attract attention. Feng Yi said, "Father gave me a plate. It's enough." Sun Lan seemed to have thought of something and looked at Feng Yi with envy. Chapter 1783. After Mingyilwan, it was Song of Chasing Waters. During the performance of Song of Chasing Waters, the rider had to ride the horse steadily on the bumpy road. The grading criteria were similar to Mingyilwan. The drill ground was wide and flat. There was no area suitable for Song of Chasing Waters. Everyone thought that they had to change the venue, but Zhang Pengji had no intention of doing so. She clapped her hands 3 times. The soldiers stationed in the distance tacitly opened up a path. The spectators in the distance couldn't help but stretch their necks. "What's that?" Questions were asked from the crowd. Zhang Pengji said, "The Song of Chasing Waters will be tested on it." When everyone saw it clearly, a celebrity couldn't help but sneer. Is this considered playing to the gallery or being overjoyed? Zhang Pengji had asked someone to move the plot of land there and put it together to form an examination venue. In the eyes of these contrarians, this action was like taking off one's pants and farting. The drill ground could be moved if there was nothing important. They actually spent so much manpower, material resources, and financial resources to move the plot of land here. What a waste! Zhang Pengji had good hearing. She had heard many suffocating remarks made by these contrarians. Salted Fish felt that Zhang Pengji was too naive, but in fact, Zhang Pengji didn't care about them at all. The contrarians were a group of clowns. No matter how much they talked, they couldn't hurt Zhang Pengji at all. What made the contrarians feel worse than scolding back was ignoring them. They were the third-class celebrities in Feng Zhu's words. No matter what they did, their ultimate goal was to accumulate connections and prestige to lay a good foundation for their future career advancement. Since ancient times, there was no lack of celebrities who used this method to advance. The more they scolded those in power, the more they were valued. Firstly, they didn't think that they were contrarians. They were saying things that others didn't dare to say. Secondly, if they became officials and were put in an important position by Zhang Pengji in the future, this old history could be dug up and become a story of the ruler and her ministers forgetting all enmity with a smile. Not only would they step on those in power to increase their prestige and add a layer of golden light, but those in power could also use this to show their magnanimity. However, Zhang Pengji chose to ignore them and let them continue to jump and jump. This was very uncomfortable. Under a smiley face, angle. I really remember that the Lord has good hearing. She definitely heard what those vile people said. Feng Zhen laughed maliciously. The celebrities worked hard to put on a show, but the Lord turned a blind eye. Zhang Ping said, "The Lord is actually not angry?" Feng Zhu interrupted. "A scholar's tongue can be spared but not silenced." Wei Ci also said, "The Lord is kind and benevolent, he will not be calculative with them." Taking care of this non-lethal contrarian was not only giving the contrarian too much face, but it was also disgusting. If Zhang Pengji really went online to deal with the trolls, it would provoke the backlash of the scholars and make the trolls even more vicious. Yes, in this era, imperial power wasn't centralized, and it wasn't absolute. It wasn't as exaggerated as the literary inquisition mentioned by Salted Fish in the live stream room. Scholars had the right to express their opinions. Even a king didn't have the right to kill someone just because they said something wrong. That was the action of a tyrant. Of course, not having the right to kill them didn't mean that they couldn't. It was just that killing them would leave a bad reputation. The emperor cherished his reputation and would not offend these scholars. Zhang Pengji was not an emperor, but she was not far from it. While they were talking, the Song of Chasing the Waters began. Wei Ci realized that the exam venue, which was put together at the last minute, looked a little strange. It looked a little fake. It didn't look like people had guessed that the land had been taken down and moved here. It looked like it was man-made. Zhang Ping said, "Zixiao's observation is meticulous. This thing is indeed made by a craftsman." In this era, the level of tools and technology was limited. No matter how powerful Zhang Pengji was, she couldn't have allowed people to take down a whole piece of land. The venue for the Song of Chasing the Waters was made by Zhang Ping's people using lime to treat it with special methods. In order to make it more realistic, the base was made with lime as the raw material. Real objects were placed on the surface, imitating the rugged terrain. It took more than a month to build. The quantity of this lime was very small, which made Zhang Ping feel that it was a pity. If there was more of it, it could be used to build the foundation of a house. This was because after hardening, it could glue things together. It was strong and hard, so it was a good auxiliary material for building roads and houses. Zhang Ping sighed. If everyone had eyes like Zixiao's, they wouldn't have made a fool out of themselves like that group of people. Wei Ci smiled faintly without saying anything. The Song of Chasing the Waters assessment was also divided into groups of 50 people. Each group was made up of 10 people. The order of going on stage was based on the order of drawing lots in the first round. Sun Lan's performance this time was not bad. She got full marks. Feng Yi's performance also improved. She got 5 points. The girls of the Golden Scale Academy still crushed the boys with a very high percentage of full marks. The faces of the onlookers were livid. They didn't criticize Jiang Pengji's black box operation anymore. They started to ridicule the incompetence of the boys of the Golden Scale Academy. Sun Lan's Song of Chasing the Waters had long finished. When Feng Yi finished the exam and came to rest, he couldn't help but complain to his partner. These scholars are really interesting. If they really think that the Song of Chasing the Waters is easy and can easily get full marks, they should give it a try. They only knew how to stand at the side and criticize. Sun Lan's heart was burning with anger. You up no can OBB. Feng Yi smiled and comforted him. If they want to offend us, let them. Sooner or later, they will suffer. The Master of Lanting obviously wants to put us in an important position. Our classmates' futures will definitely not be bad. It's their business to make so many potential enemies just for a moment of pleasure. Sun Lan was speechless. His partner's words made sense. Feng Yi continued, passing the graduation exam only means that everyone has completed their studies in the academy. It doesn't mean that they have become officials. There is an even more important exam in May. Not only can we participate, but those scholars who are interested in becoming officials can also participate. At that time, we will let them know whether it is difficult to get full marks for the Song of Chasing the Waters. Before that, we have to be careful with our words and actions to avoid being used against us. Outsiders thought that the students of the Golden Scale Academy were young and had a different path to becoming an official. They didn't know that Jiang Pengji had the intention to let these juniors compete with the famous scholars who had been famous for a long time. If these scholars lost to Feng Yi and the others in all aspects, their reputation would be ruined and they would vent their anger. Sun Lan said, "Then now," Feng Yi smiled. "Strive to get a good ranking. Otherwise, how are you going to explain to military advisor Qiguan?" Qiguan Rang's father-in-law was difficult to deal with. Even if Sun Lan made Qiguan Jinghui relent, Qiguan Rang couldn't be dissatisfied with Sun Lan. Sun Lan was speechless. He almost forgot about his father-in-law. He was a little scared when he thought of his future father-in-law's dark face. "Wrongly. Do you think I can get into the top 10? He didn't even want to be in the top 3. It would be good to be in the 10th place." Feng Yi looked at his partner with pity in her eyes. Chapter 1784. The Song of Chasing Water wasn't worth watching, so they didn't pay much attention to it after watching a few sets. Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to daydream for a while, but she could not slack off for the following, passing the Juanbiao. When the students started, Salted Fish's topic of discussion changed from Feng Zhan to Jiang Pengji. Why? Passing the Jun's watch was a test of one's riding skills. There was also an element of etiquette in it. Specifically, one had to salute Jiang Pengji. Upon seeing this familiar scene, the Salted Fishes exploded. Billy Billy animation. If you're not afraid of death, don't you think this is like a military parade? Cafeteria Daffinanti. For example, the host said, "Thank you for your hard work," and the students replied, "To serve the Lord?" Tudu Faccio. Previous post. I've put you on the November list. Juicer. Open the door, check the meter, Dongfeng Express. Jiang Pengji didn't quite understand the political situation in Salted Fish's dimension. She didn't quite understand the underlying meaning of their banter. Salted Fish wasn't the only one who was in an uproar. The celebrities couldn't sit still either. They all knew Jiang Pengji's ambition. They knew that all she needed to do was to ascend to the throne and announce it to the world. However, as long as he did not ascend to the peak, he would not be a monarch. It would be unjustifiable for him to accept the greetings of the students of the Golden Scale Academy. However, no one cared about what they were thinking. Feng Zhan and the others were still watching with great interest.
When the students performed Passing the Monarch Watch, they also felt their hearts fill with pride. Especially the girl from the Golden Scale Academy. Her eyes were red after she left the stage. Fortunately, I didn't listen to them back then and give up. Now, the bitterness is over and the sweetness is coming. Even if they had independent household registration, even if they had studied for so many years, even if they had martial prowess and talent that others did not dare to underestimate, these girls still felt that it was too unreal. He was afraid that all of this was just an illusion, a beautiful dream that would disappear after he woke up. They grew up in the academy, and most of the girls were not so persistent about marriage. What they were worried about was their own prospects and future. Therefore, a few of them decided to go to the women's camp to develop themselves. Now, their positions varied from high to low, but their prospects were pretty good. Although they were putting their heads on their waistbands, the future was no longer unknown to them. Other than those who went to the military camp, there were also a few who were willing to marry because they liked a stable life. It was good for them to take care of their husbands and raise their children. In the future, when they had sons and daughters, they could also use what they had learned to teach them well. Who knows, they might even be able to cultivate good seedlings that could bring honor to their ancestors. Everyone had their own ambitions, and no one could force them to do so. A married classmate had also said something that was still fresh in his memory. The Duke of Lanting has never married in his 20s. Perhaps he thinks that all women in the world are like him, and let us stay in the academy until this age. However, women couldn't compare to men. How could they afford to drag it out for so many years? Everyone said that the Duke of Lanting intended to help a woman become an official. However, we had been studying in the academy for so long that we were almost worn out, yet there was still no news. Don't blame me. I'm 2 years older than all of you. I really can't afford to drag this on. You can still wait, but if I continue to delay, which future husband will want such an old man? Even if I marry him, I'll still be someone's stepmother and raise someone else's child. I'm sorry for all the years of nurturing you, Master Lanting. If there's a chance in the future, I'll repay you. Even though the Golden Scale Academy had tried its best to isolate the influence of the outside world on the students, they didn't stay in the academy all year round. There would always be times when they came into contact with the outside world. Faced with such an old age, seeing women of the same age getting married and becoming mothers, having their own bloodlines and stable families, an indescribable uneasiness spread from the bottom of their hearts. They were like passers-by walking in the dark, unable to see their future. They didn't know whether they were stepping on a sunny path that led to a bright path, or a single plank bridge filled with thorns and dangers, or a lofty cliff. These worries were also shared by the girls who stayed behind. Some of them couldn't afford to gamble, so they retreated to the safe haven and chose to marry and have children. However, today, when they drove the chariot past the shaft of the gate and looked at Jiang Pengji, their uneasiness and confusion vanished like smoke in thin air. In the end, they still waited for the opportunity, waited for the light, and saw that the future was a sunny path instead of a lofty cliff that they had been worried about. Compared to Mingyil Wan and Xueqi, which had a large number of points deducted, passing the ruler's watch had a higher percentage of full marks. Feng Yi finally got the first full mark. Of course, he wasn't happy because of this, because the next segment was Dancing on the Streets and Chasing Birds by the Left. These two segments tested one's stamina, endurance, and technique. Feng Yi's body wasn't strong enough, so there was no hope of getting full marks. Even so, Feng Yi had a brilliant performance in the Dancing on the Streets segment. Who asked him to be so good-looking and elegant? His performance attracted the attention of many of the wives of the aristocratic families. They secretly asked which family he was from to have such a graceful bearing. The moment they asked, the faces of the wives darkened. It wasn't that they despised Feng Yi for being Feng Zhen's son, it was just that Feng Yi had been engaged by Feng Jin's daughter. No matter how good he was, wouldn't he still be someone else's son-in-law? After searching and searching, there would always be a good candidate who was alone. After searching and searching, they really did find a few targets that they were satisfied with. These young talents were all from aristocratic families, and they were not bad-looking. Among them, the most popular ones were the two sons of the Feng family. Even if their results weren't outstanding, they were born with a dazzling halo. Especially Feng Gui's eldest son, the eldest son of the direct line of descent, who was going to inherit the Feng family in the future. The second son of the first wife was also not bad. He did not have the pressure of inheriting the clan and was worthy of his daughter. When they heard that the two young men of the Feng family had a divorce from their legal mother, and that Feng Gui's wife was now the stepmother, their burning hearts cooled down a little. Children who didn't have a mother to teach them didn't seem very reliable. Jiang Pengji was seriously observing the potential of these students, but a group of wives from aristocratic families were looking for matchmaking partners for their children under smiley face, angle, under salted fish. They watched the ancient version of dressage with great interest. Even if they didn't understand the intricacies of it, it was still very pleasing to the eyes to see a valiant and heroic girl or a graceful young man on horseback. Xueqi, after watching it, I only had one thought. I want to ride a horse. Sankei, coach, I want to ride a horse. Black-bellied Samiran. Before riding a horse, you should measure your weight first, in case the horse collapses. It's impossible to ride a horse, and we don't have a mine at home smiley face, angle. After the examination of the 5 royals, the total score was tabulated. There were 46 people with full marks, and 33 of them were girls. Feng Yi's total score was 24, and she was below average. Sun Lan was slightly better than her, and she was above average, with a total score of 27. Jiang Pengji glanced at the score and said, "It's still early. Let's continue with the next subject." After riding a horse, she followed up with archery. There were 3 subjects in archery, and each subject had 10 points, for a total of 30 points. To prevent the students from accidentally injuring others, the venue was rearranged. Looking at the arrangement, some people whispered, "The Duke of Lanting is really bold because of her skills. Isn't she afraid of being accidentally injured by the arrows? Bold because of her skills, she's also made of flesh and blood. Isn't she afraid of being careless?" Chapter 1785. No one can hurt me, let alone these immature brats.
Jiang,
Ji Yunshu secretly rolled her eyes. If it was in the original world, there were only a few people she couldn't beat in a PK. But in this world? A bunch of weak martial artists wanted to touch the hem of her clothes? It turned out that flags couldn't be randomly thrown because no one knew when they would be slapped in the face. Among the 6 arts, archery and defense were similar. Defense had 5 defenses, and archery also had 5 kinds of archery skills. They were White Arrow, Canlian, Shanzhu, Xiangqi, and Jingyi. When the exam was planned, the big shots in the academy wanted to divide archery into 5 small items according to the 5 imperial commands. Each item would give 6 points.
but Jiang?
Ji looked at the 5 shooting skills carefully. She felt that it was too easy to test the 5 shooting skills. It wasn't challenging and couldn't accurately distinguish the students' shooting skills. The big shots reacted like this. What was the master of Lanting talking about? Didn't she know how difficult it was to control the 5 shooting skills? If the 5 shooting skills were taken as an exam, how difficult would it be to get full marks? If one could get full marks, he could at least be a Dubois in the military. If he fought well, there would be a lot of room for promotion. Why did the master of Lanting say it was as easy as eating and drinking?
Jiang,
Ji demonstrated the 5 shooting skills on the spot. Other than Lu Shi, who had learned archery for 2 months before he turned 12, Ji didn't have any learning experience. In other words, she was unorthodox, but she could easily complete the 5 shooting skills.
Jiang,
Ji used her ability to prove to Master Yuan Jing and the others that people were different. Mastering the 5 shooting skills is the foundation for the students of the Golden Scale Academy. If they can't even do the foundation, what are they learning? Master Yuan Jing also knew Jiang. Ji was strict with her students. After some consideration, they cancelled the 5 shooting mode and changed it to 3 shooting. Although 3 shooting was 2 points less than 5 shooting, it was more than 2 times more difficult. When the examiner announced the 3 shooting skills, many students were confused. What's the use of only mastering the 5 shots? The enemy on the battlefield is alive, not a stationary target. You are also soldiers with legs and riding horses, not a piece of wood that stands motionless in the same place. Ji Yi berated the examinees, interrupting their thoughts.
yes, Jiang?
Ji shamelessly changed the exam topic. According to the initial arrangement, the students were divided into different distances to shoot at the faraway targets. The students would be graded according to the number of points they scored. Of course, when shooting an arrow, one had to use 5 different archery techniques. Only by fulfilling these conditions would one be able to get full marks. According to this assessment condition, out of the 200 participants in the Golden Scale Academy, at least 150 would get full marks. What's the difference between everyone getting full marks and everyone getting 0 marks? Naturally, he had to increase the difficulty of the test and widen the gap between the scores of students with different archery skills.
So Jiang?
G increased the difficulty by a little on the basis of 5 shots under, smiley face, angle, under everyone. Is the Duke of Lanting sure that it's only a tiny bit of difficulty? Did the Lord of Lanting misunderstand the 2 words, a little? Or did they misunderstand? After listening to the content of the 3 shooting skills, Sun Lan's face turned pale. The girls in the queue also had a serious look on their faces. I feel that, after this assessment, no one will be able to maintain full marks. Was the Lord of Lanting really testing them? Was he really not trying to kill them? Fengyi said, "There's always someone better than you. Don't be too full of yourself. There are many students with excellent archery skills. What if someone managed to get full marks on the transformative difficulty?" Sun Lan thought of her classmates in the female class and said humbly, "What Rongli said makes sense." The first item was fixed-point target shooting. As long as the arrow didn't miss the target, they could get points. To get full marks, the examinees had to use 3 or more archery techniques. The second item was a moving target. The target was a dozen or so scarecrows. The scarecrows were mounted on a moving pulley. All the vital points on the scarecrows were marked with red circles. Similarly, the examinees had to use 3 or more archery techniques to hit the target to get full marks. The third item was even more ridiculous. The examinees had to move on horseback, and the target changed from a single scarecrow to several different species of scarecrows that moved irregularly. The examinees had to use 3 or more archery techniques to hit the vital points of the scarecrows to get full marks.
Jiang?
Ji saw that the examinees understood the rules, so he announced the start of the test. They're just a bunch of kids who haven't seen blood on the battlefield or even hunted. How can they get full marks? The spectators muttered in their hearts. They all agreed that these students couldn't get full marks. Even a sharpshooter from the military camp wouldn't dare to guarantee that he wouldn't lose a single mark in such a harsh test. In the end, when the first examinee got full marks, the chatter immediately died down. She's really a good seedling. Write down her name. If she can't become an official after this, I'll go to the Lord to ask for her. Jiang Nongqin was also present today. However, she was leading the troops to maintain law and order and protect the Lord. At the same time, she wanted to find good seedlings from the freshmen. The women's battalion had indeed developed rapidly in recent years, but only 50% of the troops were fighting at the front line. The remaining 50% were mainly logistics military doctors. To be honest, this was not conducive for the female soldiers to fight for real power in the army. However, there were no female generals from orthodox families of generals. She could only turn her attention to the students of the Golden Scale Academy. The few girls who left the Golden Scale Academy earlier were also in her camp. Their qualities and strength were obvious to all. The students of the Golden Scale Academy taught them everything. The art of war was also a compulsory subject. The qualities of these girls were not different from those of orthodox families of generals. If the outstanding ones among them were trained well, they might be able to carry the flag of the women's battalion. The assistant general beside her acknowledged her in a low voice and carefully wrote down the names. Compared to the previous 5 Imperials, the number of people who got full marks in this subject was much lower. As of now, 180 people had finished the exam, but only 9 of them got full marks. 7 of them were girls.
Jiang?
Ji Yunshu muttered, "There are still more than 20 people who haven't finished the exam. Maybe 1 or 2 of them can get full marks and make up for double digits." This result also dealt a big blow to many confident students. The remaining students who didn't take the exam were even more stressed. "My shooting skills are still worse than XXX's. He made a mistake and got 25 points. I'll be worse later. I heard that so-and-so in the female class's 5 Imperials was quite outstanding. He also made a mistake and lost points today." The remaining 20 or so students muttered in a low voice while queuing up. At this time, a student noticed that the expression of his classmate beside him was not quite right. "Are you okay? I saw that you were distracted just now."
Now your face is even paler. If you're not feeling well, tell the examiner as soon as possible. His classmates' usual results were very good. He was better than him. Even he got 25 points in the 5 imperials, but his classmate got the bottom. It was not a class at the bottom, but 200 people at the bottom. He only got 19 points. Looking at his distracted and pale face, it should be something wrong with his body that affected his performance.
I'm fine.
His classmate's eyes wandered, and his voice was a little weak. He said, "Maybe I ate something bad for breakfast. Don't tell the examiner that if I take the exam, even if I don't perform well, I'll still get points. If I don't take the exam, I'll get 0 points. I don't want to repeat a year."
Then I'll let you lean on my shoulder.
"It'll be your turn later. Take a break first." The students of the Golden Scale Academy had been living and eating together for so many years. Occasionally there would be some conflicts, but overall, they were still united and friendly.
Thank you.
Not long after, it was his classmate's turn. "I wish you success." His classmate's face was deathly pale. He lowered his head slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up weakly.
Jiang.
Ji took a look at the student's results and frowned slightly. As a student at the bottom, he performed poorly again this time. He only got 11 points in the first 2 rounds. When he moved on to the 3rd round, 3 out of the first 5 arrows actually missed. The salted fishes also saw the trick. Look at what they discovered. There was actually a rare slacker in the Golden Scale Academy, where all the students were top students. He scored 20 points in 2 rounds, but he only got 11 points. He failed at the beginning of the 3rd round. This was the rhythm of failing.
Jiang.
Ji frowned as he watched. His fingers lightly tapped on his knees. "What's wrong with this student?"
Jiang.
Ji casually asked. The examiner below the stage stepped forward and said, "I've asked earlier. It seems like he ate something wrong with his stomach." The salted fishes sighed. This was the same as having diarrhea in the college entrance examination. Bad luck. While they were talking, the student shot another 2 arrows. One missed, and the other hit the target. However, it didn't hit the scarecrow's vital points. The student seemed to be anxious. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, drenching his dashing eyebrows. His breathing quickened, as if he had lost his composure due to the consecutive failures. It was rare to see a slacker in the Golden Scale Academy. A group of scholars sneered as they watched the show, giving the student great pressure. Is he trying to shoot 3 arrows at once? Is he trying to use the consecutive shooting technique to win back his points? A scholar noticed the student's action and saw him taking out the remaining 3 arrows from the quiver. His companion beside him said, "TSK. He didn't even hit the target earlier. Now he wants to use the consecutive shooting technique to shoot 3 arrows. He's asking to be humiliated." While they were talking, the student suddenly tightened his grip on the horse's belly. The horse under him galloped in pain. In a flash, the student held the bow and arrow tightly and pulled the bowstring to its fullest. His upper body slightly pressed down. Everyone thought that he was going to fight to the death. Unexpectedly, he suddenly changed his target to Jiang, Ji's face, throat, and heart. This unforeseen event happened too quickly. Jiang Nongqin was about to protect him. The warhorse under the student had already approached Jiang. Ji's fully pulled arrow left the bowstring. The arrow pierced through the air. Ji's lips just raised into a sneer. She knew that this student was pretending. Even if he could deceive everyone and make them believe that he was not in good condition, Jiang Nongqin would not be deceived. Ji would not be deceived. "Help!" The moment the arrow left the bowstring, fear crept into Wei Si's heart. The words "help" in his mouth were even hoarse. Chapter 1786. My lord. Take down the assassin. Everything happened too suddenly. When they came back to their senses, Jiang Ji, who was sitting on the main platform, was already lying in a pool of blood. Jiang Ji had already fallen into a pool of blood. The assassin student did not have time to do anything else. The warhorse under him suffered a heavy blow and kept neighing in pain. Before the student could do anything, someone grabbed the horse's neck and leaped up. With a sweep, the student fell off the horse's back, causing him to see stars, dislocate his jaw and break his limbs. Don't let him die. Jiang Nongqin did not even look at the assassin. She grabbed him by the neck and threw him to her trusted assistant general and soldiers. Her expression was as fierce as a Rakshas's.
She quickly ordered, "Gather all the generals to seal off the drill ground and camp.
From now on, not even a fly is allowed to fly out. Whoever dares to disobey will be killed on the spot. Do you hear me?"
"Yes, my lord."
Jiang Nongqin was shocked and angry. She acted swiftly and decisively. She directly sent soldiers to surround the audience and students in the drill ground. The students were so frightened by this turn of events that their legs turned to jelly. Their faces were as pale as if they were painted with a thick layer of white paint. Their minds were empty and they almost forgot how to think. In contrast, the reactions of the scholars, noblewomen, scholars, and officials were relatively calm. However, everyone had different thoughts. Their expressions and reactions were slightly different too. Some were worried about Jiang Ji. Would Ji die because of this? Some were worried about whether they would be implicated. Some were worried about the safety of their families. Today, everyone present was in trouble.
Jiang Ji?
It was fine if Ji Wuji died, but if anything happened, everyone's faces were pale. The Duke of Lanting was assassinated in public. The world was probably going to change. These people either stood up or sat on the spot. They looked nervous but did not dare to act rashly.
They were afraid that they would misunderstand and be stabbed to death by the group of soldiers who were eyeing them fiercely.
Only Jiang Ji's important official was not worried. Ji Yi's important official did not have any concerns. Wei Ci even ran over with his bare feet. The gravel on the drill ground piercing his soles could not hide the piercing pain in his left chest. His mind was blank. His body followed its instinct to go to Jiang Ji.
Ji.
Doctor. Where is the doctor? Wei Ci carefully helped her up but did not dare to make any big movements. He was afraid that the arrows that pierced her flesh would cause her a second injury. Following Wei Ci's movements, everyone saw Jiang Wan. Ji Yunshu's clothes on her left chest and shoulder were dyed red by the blood. Her right hand was holding the arrow, and her palm was soaked in blood. The blood flowed down her arm and dyed her sleeves the same color. When everyone saw this, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Not to mention the location of the wound. Just the amount of blood showed that her injury was not light. Wei Ci felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. At this moment, his mood was actually the same as when he first heard His Majesty riding a dragon from the sky in his previous life. At that moment, the beating heart in his left chest seemed to be frozen and sealed, and a chill spread throughout his entire body. Why isn't the doctor here yet? In his previous life he had died of old age, but this life was different. How could he accept such an accident happening to her? Today was the equestrian archery assessment. In order to prevent any accidents, the best doctors in the military camp and the city were all on standby. Never in a million years would he have thought that the one in trouble wasn't a student, but the Duke of Lanting. Jiang Nongqin captured the assassin. She still could not believe that the student could actually hurt her godlike lord. How could that be? Jiang Nongqin's expression looked calm, but her chest was churning with the urge to kill. However, she was still rational. She knew that she could not kill the assassin yet. They still needed to interrogate the assassin and follow this clue to catch the real culprit. Humph. When the real culprit surfaced, she would definitely tear the person into pieces. Jiang Nongqin personally led the soldiers to surround the main platform. She was afraid that the assassin had accomplices. The students of the Golden Scale Academy, especially the first batch of students, were all orphans of the fallen soldiers, except for a few students who came from aristocratic families. Their lord had nurtured them for more than 10 years, but now there was an assassin. Who knew if there were accomplices of the assassin among the soldiers in the military camp? Now, apart from the lord, everyone present was a suspect for Jiang Nongqin. Not long after, a few doctors rushed over with medical kits. From their disordered breathing, it could be seen that they had also rushed over as fast as they could. After passing through the human wall, the doctors put down the medical kit with a thud and gestured for Wei Ci to put Jiang Wan down. Jiang Wan was put down. At this time, LV Zhang, who had been the background for a long time, said, "Get a screen to surround this place." Kong Xintong, who came with LV Zhang as his adopted daughter, stood outside the human wall. Her status was not high enough and the situation was serious. She could not get close. She could only stand on the spot and clench her fingers anxiously.
She secretly prayed that the Lord of Lanting would turn misfortune into blessing, and that nothing would happen to him.
Not only were the people on the drill ground worried, but the salted fish in the live streaming room was also frightened. They were watching Jiang Wan. For so many years, they had seen her kill anyone who stood in her way. She was the epitome of Long Outyen.
A person who dared to charge alone with thousands of men and horses could not dodge the 3 arrows shot by the assassin?
The bullet screen changed from the original flirtatious comments to cheers and prayers. Only one bullet screen was different. That salted fish was Weibo's programmer. He prayed together with the server. Just as he sent this bullet screen, WeChat and QQ's workgroup exploded. The department management specially called him to work overtime. Salted Fish, the programmer, was speechless. The streamer was shot by an arrow, and the Weibo server was paralyzed in the next second. Sigh. Rubbing his cold forehead, the programmer held a cigarette in his mouth. His expression was one of the vicissitudes of life. Before working overtime, the programmer posted his indignation on his WeChat moments. Assassinated? Hee, if she really was assassinated, the national football team would not only win the World Cup, but it would also win it for 100 years. The existence of the live streaming room was too special. People in related industries were highly enthusiastic about the live streaming room. Many scientists had even set up research projects, hoping to draw inspiration from it and vigorously develop artificial intelligence and cross-dimensional technology. The programmer was no exception. According to their research on the live streaming room had a certain relationship with Jiang Wan. It was like the parasitic relationship between the system and the host in the system novel. If the host's life was in danger, it was impossible for the live streaming room to be quiet. However, this was not something that every salted fish knew. When they saw Jiang Wan, she was covered in blood and motionless. They felt like their brains were about to explode. On the other side, under Lu Zheng's reminder, the soldiers took out folding screens and linen to create an area for the doctors to check on the injuries. Feng Zhen and the others retreated, but their eyes were still on Jiang Wan. In Jiang Wan's direction. They looked calm, but their palms were wet with sticky sweat. Their lord had been assassinated in front of their eyes. Thinking of this, Feng Zhen's mood was like Jiang Nongqin's. His chest was filled with murderous intent. At this moment, he heard someone gossiping. They thought their voices were low, but the drill ground was silent. Even the lowest voice sounded noisy. The person said to his friend, "The Duke of Lanting was assassinated. It's fine if she can survive this, but if she can't, she has no children. The one who will ascend the throne in the future will either be her concubine brother, Lu Zhao, or someone from the Lu family."
Another person said, "The Duke of Lanting is now in his 20s.
Girls of the same age can already have children, but she. Could it be that she was born with some hidden disease and can't bear children? It's a pity that her reputation was ruined by an assassination. Her hard-earned foundation has been taken advantage of by her concubine brother." Now that the distinction between the legal wife and the concubine was clear, the scholars valued the legal wife more.
The concubine was just a little higher than the servants in the manor.
Yes, the Duke of Lanting is successful and a legal wife, but she has no children. In the end, she has to be taken advantage of by a concubine. If the Duke of Lanting passed away, wouldn't the people in the afterlife be angry and come back to life? That Wei Zixiao just said, "Save the emperor," didn't he? He didn't ascend the throne when he was alive.
If he can be conferred the title of great ancestor after his death, he can barely use the word "save the emperor," the person said in a low voice.
Lu Shi has never hidden his ambition.
She even dared to accept surpassing the emperor. Hearing this, Feng Zhan was so angry that he pulled out the sword at his waist and wanted to settle the score.
At this time, they were still saying such sarcastic words to sow discord. Did these two people want to die? However, someone moved much faster than him. Before Feng Zhan could go over, the two people had already been kicked in the head. "Arrest these two people and detain them for interrogation." The person who spoke was an angry Lu Zhao. No one knew when this brat had run over from the other side of the seats. Feng Zhan suppressed the surging anger in his heart and took a deep breath to calm himself down. He didn't want to lose control and vent his anger on Lu Zhao. At the same time, the heavily injured Jiang Ji opened his eyes. However, Ji opened her eyes and raised her hand to push away the doctor's action. She used Wei Si's strength to lean in his arms.
She pulled out the arrow that was deeply embedded in her shoulder with a little force with her right hand.
I'm fine. The doctors, Wei Si, and Jiang Nongqin looked at the blood flowing out of the wound on her shoulder and fell silent. Wei Si's hands that were holding her arms tightened slightly. He ground his teeth hard as if he was holding back something. The doctor saw Jiang. Ji woke up and pulled out the arrow herself. She was in a daze.
Jiang.
Ji didn't see Wei Si's expression and looked up at the other person.
Nongqin. Jiang Nongqin didn't have time to think about what had happened. She only knew that her lord was fine. That was enough. I'm here. Later, you and Zixiao will continue to preside over the assessment and comfort the students. Don't let this affect their results.
Jiang.
Ji had her own plans, but she didn't want to affect the students' results. This assessment had a great impact on their futures. Jiang Nongqin didn't agree immediately. Instead, she looked at Jiang Ji awkwardly. Ji Yunshu's lips moved, but no words came out. After a while she bowed her head and cupped her fists, saying hoarsely, "This general obeys." As he spoke, the doctor took out a hemostatic powder and sprinkled it on Jiang Xiang. The wound on Ji's shoulder. Was the arrow aimed at Jiang? Ji's heart came, but Jiang? Ji was not a vegetarian. She easily avoided the vital parts, but in order to make it look like she was seriously injured, she purposely made the wound bigger and let the blood flow out. It looked very scary. In fact, as long as the bleeding was stopped and the wound was bandaged, it would be fine. Wei Si glanced at the arrowhead, then looked at Zhang Yu. For the first time ever, the back of Ji Yunshu's head disobeyed the order. "Forgive me for not being able to comply with the Lord's orders." His voice sounded dry and hard, as if he were choking something in his throat. However, Jiang Nongqin could see that Wei Si's eyes were bloodshot. Ginger? Ji did not make things difficult for him. Then, Shi and Nongqin will be in charge here. I'll hide my injuries for now. Is this intentional, my lord? Jiang Nongqin asked the question in her heart. At the same time, she felt an indescribable anger. Which villain was worth the lord hurting herself to plot against? Who was worthy?
Jiang.
Ji said, "It's just a chess piece." Although she said that, the pain in her arm still made her frown slightly. Wei Si became even quieter after hearing this. He only held Jiang Xiang in his hand. He just held Jiang Xiang's arm and loosened his grip. Jiang Nongqin did not ask any more. She trusted Jiang Xiang wholeheartedly.
Jiang Xiang?
Ji's injury was not fatal, but she was a little dizzy after losing so much blood. She leaned back and nestled in Wei Si's arms. "Zixiao, carry me back." No one knew what was going on in his mind. He felt a long-lost familiarity from the Lord. This familiarity was no different from Her Majesty in his previous life. In a trance, Wei Si saw the shadow of Her Majesty in his previous life. Even the scheming smile on her lips and the coldness in her eyes were exactly the same. Every time this happened, Wei Si always felt that the person in front of him did not belong to the secular world. Her body was in the secular world, but her heart was out of it. She looked at everyone coldly, as if she was watching ants fight. Her eyes were full of contempt, mocking how naive and ridiculous the scheming of the people was. Wei Si said, "Yes." The screen was removed. Jiang Xiang left the drill ground under the protection of the guards. Jiang Nongqin stayed behind to deal with the aftermath. When everyone heard that the assessment would continue, their faces were as colorful as a palette that had been overturned. The life and death of the main character was unknown. How could they have the mood to watch the assessment? However, Jiang Nongqin said, "My lord is highly skilled in martial arts." The thief only suffered superficial injuries. After being bandaged by the doctor, he is fine. Everyone was speechless. If he was really fine, why did he leave in a coma? The wound was on the left side of his chest. No matter how they looked at it, he did not look fine, let alone a superficial injury. Jiang Nongqin saw that she could not reason with him, so she used force to threaten him. This trick worked. The drill ground quietened down in an instant. Jiang Nongqin calmed the remaining examinees with a cold expression, indicating for them to continue with the assessment. The assassination of the Duke of Lanting was a big deal. These students had been protected by the academy for many years. They had not experienced the hardships of the wind and rain, so their hearts were not strong enough. Therefore, few of the remaining 20 students performed normally. However, their foundation was still there, and their scores were not bad. When the examiner announced the new round of scores, not many students cared about this. They were all concerned about Jiang Xiang. Ji and a few clever students turned their eyes to Feng Zhan, Feng Jin, and the others, hoping to infer from their expressions that Jiang Xiang was Ji. Ji's specific situation. Will the Duke of Lanting be fine? Sun Lan's tone was a little weak.
Feng Yi said with certainty, the Duke of Lanting will be fine.
The two of them were no longer interning in the military camp. They were only students who had not graduated from the Golden Scale Academy. They could not be called Jiang Xiang. Do your part well. Feng Yi added, Father and the others have not panicked yet. How can we panic? In reality, Feng Yi was not sure what to say. His eyesight was excellent. He could see where the arrow was pierced. Even if it was not the center of the chest, it was not far away. The heart, brain, and throat were the three fatal points of the human body. The heart was fragile. Even a graze could kill. Little did he know that the arrow was indeed aimed at the heart, but at the last moment, Jiang Xiang grabbed it with her right hand. She even fiercely stabbed the arrowhead into her left shoulder to create the illusion that the wound was on her chest. Zixiao, it hurts. Jiang Xiang? Ji hummed softly.
There was a rare hint of coquettishness in her tone.
Wei Ci did not answer and asked him to make a special appointment for Jiang Yan. Ji's trusted physician came over to clean her wound. The arrow was specially used by the soldiers in the military camp. The arrowhead had a special structure. When it was pierced into the flesh and pulled out, it could hook out the skin and flesh. Wei Ci was more worried about the filth on the arrowhead. It would be troublesome if it caused the sequelae of high fever and pus. History told him that many famous generals died like this. They did not die on the battlefield, but from the filth on their wounds. The sequelae he mentioned was called tetanus under smiley face, angle, uns in the salted fish dimension. The physician bowed and said in a low voice, I'm sorry to have offended you. After that, he took out a clean pair of scissors and cut off Jiang Xiang's sleeve and shoulder. After saying that, he took out a clean pair of scissors and cut off Jiang Xiang's sleeve and shoulder. Seeing the wound clearly, the physician gasped.
Jiang Xiang?
Ji leaned against the table and sat up. She bent her legs and said lazily, I haven't even cried out in pain. What's with that look? The physician was speechless. She didn't cry out in pain? Then who was the one who shouted Zixiao, it hurts? Her wound was already blooming, yet she was still so stubborn. I didn't expect her to be such a person. The physician used his excellent medical skills to help Jiang Xiang. Ji cleaned and stitched up the wound. After giving a few reminders, she left. Wei Ci was not a soft-hearted person, but Jiang Yusheng was not a soft-hearted person. But Jiang Xiang was a surprise to him. Seeing the bloody wound, all emotions disappeared. Only worry and heartache were left.
The assassins this time. Do you know who sent them, my lord?
The students of the Golden Scale Academy, except for a few, were the orphans of soldiers who had died in battle. It was equivalent to the Lord raising them. Who would have thought that there would be a traitor among them? Who would actually wait for an opportunity to assassinate Jiang during such an important assessment?
Ji.
Zixiao, this is not important. Wei Ci's heart thumped. He had a vague, ominous premonition. Was this targeting Jiang Xiang? Who was the mastermind behind Ji's assassination was actually not important. Could it be Zixiao? When we were not paying attention, the Golden Scale Academy became a chess piece in the struggle between the various forces. Ji said, students of commoner origin still have a shallow foundation. I don't blame them. They are too insignificant and have no right to control themselves. Wei Ci understood after thinking for a while.
Jiang Xiang?
Ji asked again, do you know who the force behind the assassination of my students is? Wei Ci did not know. Please enlighten me, my lord.
Jiang Xiang?
Ji laughed softly. It's the Liu family. Wei Ci was speechless. The Liu family? Yes, the Liu family. Jiang Xiang smiled lazily. Ji Yunshu smiled lazily. If news of the assassination were to spread, the Liu family would probably panic.
Panic?
Why would it be panic too?
Unless, thinking of his lord's bad temper, Wei Xi suddenly understood.
The Lu family didn't order the student to assassinate?
Jiang Xiang?
Ji said, Zixiao is smart. This student is a pawn they bribed.
I don't know when he will come in handy.
Wei Xi frowned.
Since the lord said so, it could be seen that this pawn was a hidden pawn for the Lu family.
It would not be moved easily. Then who could it be? Who would use the eyes and ears that the Lu family secretly controls to assassinate the lord and kill with a borrowed knife? Before he finished speaking, Wei Xi suddenly choked. His eyes met Jiang Xiang's. Ji's eyes. At that moment, her smile was like a flower. Chapter 1787. Wei Xi pursed his lips. Did he really think that he and Jiang Yi were in the same boat? When he and Jiang Shao looked at each other, his mind seemed to be sucked away by that pair of misty deep eyes. At this moment, he forgot how to speak, and at the same time, forgot how to respond. Jiang Shao? Seeing his dazed look, Ji burst out laughing. Ignoring the injury on her shoulder, she got up and walked to Wei Xi. Her uninjured right hand caressed his face. The action was intimate, like a lover whispering softly, revealing an indescribable decadence, making Wei Xi's ears turn red. If this action was done by a hooligan, it would be frivolous. But the person in front of him was Jiang Shao? Ji. She and Wei Xi could be considered as an unregistered husband and wife. This intimate action added to the fun. Are you afraid of me, Zixiao? Jiang Shao? Ji's lips curled up.
Wei Xi then realized that his lord's lips were very pale and thinner than usual.
Afraid? Where did this come from? Wei Xi regained his senses and covered Jiang Shao with his warm and broad palm. Ji gently rubbed the back of her hand. I'm just a little confused. Why did you do this? Do you still remember what you promised before? Why did you put yourself in danger this time? In his previous life, Wei Xi might not have realized it, but in this life, he could see it very clearly. His lord was best at tricking people. For example, this time, wasn't the so-called mastermind behind the scenes the person in front of him? Wei Xi was not angry at her tricking people, but at her disregard for her own safety. She actually took the risk and came back with a body full of injuries. Jiang Shao? Ji heard the second half of the sentence and immediately felt guilty. She tried to retract her hand. Unexpectedly, Wei Xi, who had always been gentle, also became tough for once and grabbed her hand suddenly. The two of them were in a stalemate, looking into each other's eyes, neither willing to give in first. After a long time, Jiang Shao? Ji Xian was terrified. However, she would not admit that she was henpecked. How could loving, understanding, and respecting one's partner be henpecked? This time Jiang Shao? Ji Xian wanted to say something soft, but Wei Xi pursed his lips tightly and poked her wound with his other free hand. Jiang Shao, who had always been unflinching even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. Ji Yunshu gave him face and had to hide for a while. She said softly, Zixiao, it will hurt. She thought that by acting coquettishly and giving in to Wei Xi, she would be able to pass this hurdle. She did not expect Wei Xi to have his own tricks up his sleeve. Is my lord really in pain? A certain someone who could keep a straight face even when his hand was severed showed a sincere expression, and nodded his head as if he was pounding garlic. She was a patient now. No matter what she had done before, the most important thing now was to coax her and care for her. Let's just forget about the danger I put myself in previously. Can't we just pretend that it never happened? However, Wei Xi said, it turns out that my lord also has a body of flesh and blood. You've never cultivated the indestructible body of Vajra, and you're not as invulnerable as immortals. Ginger? Ji Yunshu curled her lips and said something perverted. If it's really invulnerable, Wen Zhang and the rest will cry. If it was really invulnerable, young master wouldn't be able to make it, let alone make it. Wei Xi was a righteous boy. Did he not hear Zhang's voice? He suppressed his anger and said to her, all right, since my lord still has a body of flesh and blood, there will be a moment of death. If the enemy's arrow did not pierce into your shoulder, but your heart or near your heart, based on the structure of the arrowhead just now, does my lord think that your heart will still be intact? If the heart is damaged, can you still live? On the drill ground, Ginger? Ji Yunshu pulled out the arrow without changing her expression. The wound was badly mangled by the barbs. The wound that was originally only the width of a finger was twisted by the barbs to the width of 3 fingers. The flesh was even scratched out. Wei Xi felt pain just by looking at it.
Even if she did not even frown, his heart would ache.
My lord's words carry enormous weight. Why did you go back on your word this time? Who was the one who promised Wei Xi that he would not mess around anymore and that he would not risk his life as a joke? Ginger? Ji Yunshu said, I have my reasons. Wei Xi said, if I can't share your worries, what's the use of having me? My lord, why can't you let me do the things that you must do? Ginger? Ji Yunshu smiled helplessly. Let you experience today's assassination? Zixiao, you'll lose your life. How do you know that I'm not willing to risk my life for you, my lord?
Wei Xi gritted his teeth and said, I'm willing.
From my previous life to this life, I have never flinched. Even if my lord's injury is not enough to threaten your life, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for you. Ginger? Ji Yunshu frowned. Only then did she realize that Wei Xi was really angry.
Wei Xi would not show his anger on his face when he was angry, but his anger was no less stressful than his emotional outbursts.
I suddenly have a question. In my previous life, did His Majesty really reach the end of his lifespan by riding the dragon to the sky? Wei Xi did not know why he thought of this. The more he thought about it, the more upset he felt.
As intelligent as he was, he could not sort out these messy emotions.
Did he risk his life again? Not waiting for Ginger? Ji Yunshu opened her mouth.
Wei Xi said with reddened eyes, no matter if His Majesty really rode the dragon to the sky or if he once again risked his life to clean up the Qing dynasty and eliminate dissidents for His Highness Jiang Yan. No matter if His Majesty is dead or alive, Wei Zixiao is really dead. He committed suicide. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's expression was solemn. My lord, you naturally have your reasons for doing this. As a subject, I shouldn't ask too much. But Wei Xi is not only your subject, but also your lover, right? Wei Xi asked her, if my lord makes the first move, do you think I will die for my lord or for my love? Ginger? Ji Yunshu said, I have to do it. But you can remind me, Wei Xi continued. This batch of students from the Golden Scale Academy is my lord's painstaking effort, and also my lord's. Because of you, I hope that they will be safe and sound more than anyone else. They are related to the future plans, and even more so to my lord's great cause. You only need to reveal 1 or 2 things, and I will naturally follow your footsteps. In my lord's heart, is Wei Xi a smart person or a fool? If he was a smart person with 1 or 2 clues, would he not be able to guess that Ginger? Ji Yunshu's thoughts would not be able to keep up with her footsteps? If he was a fool, even if Ginger? Ji Yunshu told him the detailed information, he would not be able to understand her intentions. Ginger? Ji Yunshu did not give Wei Xi any time to react. Wei Xi's previous words were still lingering in her mind. In her previous life, not long after the news of her riding the dragon to bury the heavens spread, Wei Xi committed suicide. Whether his suicide was forced by the situation or voluntary, or both, the result was obvious. Wei Xi was dead. But what about her previous life? Was she really dead? She analyzed the information that Wei Xi had revealed and combined it with her understanding of herself. Ji Yunshu felt that it was unlikely. Perhaps, it was another entrapment. However, this entrapment was a failure. It lost Wei Tsong the first's high-spirited spirit, and also Wei Xi's life. When this guess appeared in her mind, there was a faint but not negligible stabbing pain in her chest. After a long time, Ginger? Ji Yunshu half-squatted in front of Wei Xi, her line of sight level with him. She leaned forward, and their foreheads touched. She sighed softly, I'm sorry, there won't be a next time. A mere 11 words lightly brushed away the suppressed uneasiness, anger, and bitterness in Wei Xi's heart. In the face of this person, his principles and bottom line were like a fart. My lord does not need to apologize. Wei Xi's voice lowered, but because of his anger just now, it was a little hoarse. Zixiao, you want to see Ginger? Gee. Wei Xi's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had received a great shock. Ginger? Ji put her hands on his shoulders and laughed softly. The person that the world knows of will always be labeled as Lu Shi. Ji Yunshu's hand touched the base of his ear, her fingers pinching his bloodshot earlobe as she said, "But Zixiao, the name that you want to hear, the person that you want to see, from the beginning to the end, isn't it Jiang?"
Ji.
I want to tear off the identity of Lu Shi and restore the original name that we have been familiar with for many years. When she said this, Wei Ci suddenly understood the intention of the other party's scheme. The familiar entrapment, the familiar killing many birds with one stone. Her meticulous calculations and extremely coquettish operation had never disappointed Wei Ci.
Jiang.
Ji Yunshu said, "Most of the students in the Golden Scale Academy come from commoners, not even poor families. More than half of them have no parents and are all alone. Without relatives or family background, they can only rely on themselves. Unfortunately, they are just ordinary people and can only be pawns in other people's games. Everything is beyond their control. I said before, I don't blame them. If you want to blame someone, blame those who have extended their claws too far." Wei Ci woke up from the quarrel just now and immediately went into work mode.
"My lord, you mean? Find a reason to flare up and chop off these claws."
There's no excuse more powerful than the fact that I was assassinated and almost lost my life.
Jiang.
Ji Yunshu snorted coldly. "I originally just wanted to get rid of these guys and at the same time beat up the others who didn't have time to act so that they would know their place. Most of the students in the Golden Scale Academy will be involved in politics. Whether they stay in the imperial court or be appointed as local officials, they have unlimited potential. Controlling them is equivalent to controlling the resources that they will have in the future. How could I allow this to happen? If I let those people have their way, will the imperial examinations in the future be for me and the country to nurture talents or for them to choose eagle claws?" Wei Ci said. "But my lord chose Lady Lu. Lady Lu should have controlled that student a long time ago and used him as a hidden pawn that might come in handy in the future. In the end, my lord dug him out and even secretly impersonated Lady Lu to give the student the order to assassinate me. Fishing for justice, killing with a borrowed knife, and finally making Lady Lu take the blame for the assassination."
Jiang.
Ji Yunshu said, "There's a reason why I chose Lady Lu. I want to make a clean break with them and at the same time, make them put away their ambitions." Making a clean break with them was to restore the name Jiang? Ji. And make them put away their ambitions because of my children?
Jiang.
Ji Yunshu spread her hands and said, "Yes, I still don't have any children, which made Lady Lu ambitious and have ideas that they shouldn't have. They set up more than one hidden weapon in the Golden Scale Academy. They bribed a few more outstanding students who didn't have outstanding results. Those students have a promising future. Their studies aren't top-notch, but their temperaments are suitable for officialdom and they will be able to do well in the future. If they can stand firm in the imperial court, wouldn't it be equivalent to Lady Lu controlling real power? If my children can be born and grow up in the future, it'll be fine. If they don't or die young, they'll definitely advise me to adopt one. If I'm unfortunate enough to die, Lady Lu will benefit the most in the end."
The people of Lady Lu that Wei Ci had met before appeared in his mind.
This idea is the idea of clan leader Lu Heng? The previous clan leader Lu Heng?
Qingxi.
Fu Nashu? Since Lu Heng? Taunted Chu Song?
Fu Nashu.
Kip Cun Locust and collapsed? Locust blinked?
Fu Kuhui.
Swoosh sent health? In order not to affect Lady Lu, Lu Heng? Instigated by Miao Mei?
Crutch.
Now the clan leader of Lady Lu was Lu Heng, who was also Jiang, Ji Yunshu's cousin in this body. Wei Ci and Lu Heng? Marriage? Hypocrisy? Nanny? Responsibility? Private hoisting reed?
Jane.
Hissing ridges and poking brimstone? On the contrary, the father and son were quite smart. Even if they had ambitions, they wouldn't give them to Jiang? Ji's weakness.
Jiang.
Ji Yunshu shook her head. It's not cousin brothers. The internal situation of the Lu family is a little complicated. This matter even implicates Gu Zhan, my stepmother. Why is Lady Gu Zhan also? Lady Gu Zhan will be involved because she also has ambitions. Ji Yunshu wanted to hide it, but thinking of her promise, she revealed a few words. However, her ambitions were not big at first. It was just that I fanned the flames and pushed her from behind. Wei Ci was dumbfounded.
3 questions lingered in his mind.
Who am I? Where am I?
What am I doing? Why did the Lord plot against Lady Guzhan as well? Killing many birds with one stone, taking care of Lady Lu, the restless aristocrats, and Guzhan? Guzhan was ambitious, but the Lord had secretly connived at her ambition to expand it. It was too magical.
Jiang.
Ji said with a gloomy face. Guzhan is Lady Guzhan and I am not Lu Shi.
This reason is sufficient. Wei Ci was silent.
This reason was indeed sufficient.
Jiang.
Ji continued, Guzhan's ambitions are not limited to being the Empress Dowager. I can give her endless glory and wealth, but a person's ambition is limitless. Once the seed of ambition sprouts, even without me adding fuel to the fire, Guzhan will reach this step sooner or later. I only treated her a little coldly, letting her have wealth but no real power to show off.
After a year or two, she developed this kind of ambition.
There was always a ravine between us. She knew that I was not the real Lu Shi, but a wandering ghost who made a deal with her. She kept my secret, and I gave her glory and wealth. In the end, this deal was not solid. Wasn't she worried that I would secretly kill her once I gained power? After all, only the dead can keep their mouths shut, and the living cannot be trusted. Wei Ci said, Lady Guzhan was worried about this, so, Jiang?
Ji said. So she betrayed me.
Wei Ci's face turned cold.
Jiang.
Ji said, Guzhan is very close to the old farts of Lady Lu.
I heard that she is especially fond of the children of Lady Lu. Without further explanation, Wei Ci understood everything. If I touch Lady Guzhan, I'm afraid it will be hard to explain to Meng Hang and Yesun. Jiang? Ji smiled contemptuously. I revert to Jiang? Ji's identity is enough. Not to break away from Lady Lu, but to become an independent clan. Once she reverted to her surname, she would slowly deal with these people.
Jiang.
Ji had no feelings for Guzhan. The two of them were just collaborators from the beginning. Guzhan was the first to have ambitions.
Jiang.
Ji was just taking the opportunity to add fuel to the fire, to make her ambitions cross the line, and then find an excuse to kill her.
Chapter 1788. Zixiao, do you think I'm too heartless? Ji, she would also care about her image in the eyes of her partner. No matter what, Lu Shi's body doesn't belong to me. After I took over the body, I schemed against Lu Shi's family again and again. In the eyes of ordinary people, Jiang Zizi was the most beautiful woman in the world. Ji Yunshu's actions were indeed too much. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was heartless.
However, Wei Ci said, my lord did not scheme for no reason, did he? In terms of affection, my lord has done more than enough.
Ginger? She had used Lu Shi's body, but she wasn't the one who murdered Lu Shi. She had only taken a body that didn't belong to anyone. She didn't hide this from Lu Shi's family, from Lu Shi, Gu Min, Gu Zhen, Madame Hu, and even Lu Zhao. Ji offers benefits. If you don't make a sound while enjoying the benefits, what's the point of making a fuss after?
His Highness had always been a person of her word.
Whatever she said, she would definitely do it. Since she had promised Gu Zhan that she would give her wealth and glory, she would not go back on her word. In the end, Gu Zhan was not satisfied with what she had. She wanted more, to control real power, and even to manipulate Jiang?
Ji.
Who knew what she would ask for in the future? How could there be such a good thing in the world? If she dares to push her luck, don't blame the Lord for falling out with her. In the words of a brainless fan, Ginger? Ji was Wei Ci's principle, worldview, and bottom line. No one could cross it. So, how could Wei Ci feel that his lord was heartless? If she was truly heartless, not to mention Lu Shi and Lu Zhao, the entire Lu family would have been defeated by her, just like in her previous life. In his previous life, the Lu family was also one of those who wouldn't die if they didn't court disaster. They only had themselves to blame for the ending. Zixiao's words are always in my heart. She and Wei Ci had known each other for more than 10 years.
Over the years, the two of them had only blushed twice, and each time it only lasted for a few hours.
Ji Tailang was courting death. They were all adults. They wouldn't play the "you're heartless, you're unintentional, you're being unreasonable" game, and they wouldn't let the misunderstanding worsen. It was fine as long as such a huge misunderstanding was cleared up. Why should they hide it and cause an even bigger conflict in the end, driving a wedge between them? Therefore, the alarm was lifted. Not long after, Ji became indecent again. She flirted with Wei Ci with a cheeky face. Wei Ci saw that she was injured, so he took advantage of her verbally. He turned a blind eye and let Jiang Yu do whatever she wanted. Ji is mischievous.
The relationship between the two of them became even more harmonious. They were lovey-dovey with each other, not knowing that the outside world had been invaded by Jiang Qianqian.
The news of Ji Ye's assassination caused a huge uproar. The reactions of the various forces were different. Some were doubtful, some were worried, and some were guilty. Huang Song belonged to the group of skeptics. There was nothing he could do. Back then, Ji Yunshu had used the tactic of being attacked by an assassin to harass Huang Song. Even after so many years, Huang Song was still traumatized by this matter. He asked around for information, even if he knew Jiang Yu. Ji Zhan was assassinated, but he still felt that it was unreal. Ginger? When Ji Yi was assassinated, Feng Ju was also present and witnessed the entire process. He said to Huang Song, "Even though I don't know the exact extent of her injuries, judging from the amount of blood she's lost, it's most likely serious." Huang Song didn't know how to answer. Even with his friends as witnesses, he still felt that the news was a little unreal. He said, "With Lanting's martial arts skills, I don't think we can make a conclusion too early." Thinking back to the Huang Shui meeting years ago, when the feudal lords went to the imperial city of Chenzhou to protect the emperor, Huang Song still remembered what happened at that time. The one who left the deepest impression was Jiang Yu. Ji Yi used a ceremonial tablet to dismember the demon's body during the court meeting. That demon was dismembered in front of Huang Song. How could a killer who could use a ceremonial tablet as a murder weapon be seriously injured by a student who hadn't even passed the graduation exam? Ridiculous. Based on my understanding of Lanting, who knows what evil tricks she's up to this time? Huang Song shook his head and said, "She hasn't led troops to fight many battles in recent years, but she used to be a fierce general who galloped on the battlefield and came in and out of tens of thousands of troops at will. She was a ruthless person who could kill several enemy generals in a row. Even if she's cultivated her character these years, the vigilance in her bones hasn't disappeared. No matter how powerful the assassin is, he can't take her life, right?" He gambled all his wealth on Jiang Yu. Ji Yi was definitely up to something. The outside world is abuzz. One moment, it said that the Duke of Lanting was assassinated. The next moment, it said that she was seriously injured and died of illness. Some people are suspicious, but some people believe it. Huang Song sneered, "This is Lu Shi's usual trick. Whoever believes it is unlucky. Didn't she use this trick to get rid of a few stubborn aristocratic families in Nanxing not long ago? For example, the unlucky Nan family of Fenzhou. Not only did they fail in the assassination, but they were also killed. She even baited them, causing their entire family to die with them." Feng Ju laughed. "Using the same trick again?" Huang Song said, "It doesn't matter if the method is old, as long as it works. Look at what she's doing. There are still stupid fish that can't wait to take the bait." Feng Ju and Huang Song's deduction was based on Jiang Yu's strength. However, others didn't think so. They only heard that Jiang Yu was good at fighting. However, they had no idea how good Ji was. Jiang Yu? Ji Yu was assassinated in public. The bleeding was not fake, and the location of the wound could not be faked. The arrowhead even had a special barb in the military. The news of her dying of illness was fake, but it was true that she was seriously injured by the assassination. It was also true that she had no children. No matter how powerful she was, could she turn the tables? The Lu family was in chaos. Lu Heng was extremely disappointed in the room full of elders and famous seniors.
Lu Heng knew that the Lu family was trying to rope in the students of the Golden Scale Academy, but he didn't know that these old fellows would be so daring.
At the beginning, we agreed to rope in that group of commoner students for the sake of the family's future. Didn't our words sound so good?
Lu Heng was almost going mad with anger.
This news even reached the ears of his recuperating father. Egg punishment? Yao Yu? Huh? Salty? Face wash? Play? Arrogance? Instant brilliance trick? Jia Xian? Xiong Tu soil?
Dazzling mu mei qing yanjing wei xia emu screen? Dan June. These elders had extremely high prestige in the clan. When had they ever been scolded by a junior like this? They and Lu? Harass Geizi? Sick? Pay a visit?
Knock on the stool and endure the fading of the apron. What's more, the assassination was not done by us.
Someone must have framed us.
Lu Heng laughed in anger.
Framing him? Without evidence, how can you make people believe that you didn't do it?
Lu Heng said. Lu Shi sighed, however, has evidence to prove that this matter has something to do with the Lu family and you.
Pray to the gods and Buddha that Lu Shi is safe and sound.
He will forgive you on account of his uncle. If anything happens to her, the entire Lu family will be buried with her, including all of you.
Lu Heng's words were too impolite. The elders could not keep their faces. Lu, Lak, Xiao Xian family? Tu Tue? Ji Zhao's mother?
School.
One of them said, "Isn't it good if something really happens to Lu Shi? At least Lu Shi isn't as fickle as this girl." Lu Shi still cared about the family, but Lu Shi didn't care about the family.
From Jiang?
After Ge split the sect, the more the elders thought about it, the more uncomfortable they felt.
Jiang?
It was fine that Ge didn't take care of the family, but she suppressed them both openly and secretly. Gu Zhan was her legal mother in name, but she was also restrained. How could there be such an unfilial descendant in the world? Another person said, if Lu Shi takes over, he will only be left with a lowly status and bloodline bastard, Lu Zhao. Lu Shi has deep feelings for Gu Min and hates Lu Zhao, a bastard. He also made it clear that he wouldn't let Lu Zhao inherit the family business. When the time comes, us old fellows will choose an outstanding legal son from the family to pass on to him. The Lu family's direct descendants are much better than Lu Zhao's. Most importantly, Gu Zhan supported this plan. With the tacit understanding between Gu Zhan and them, they chose a few outstanding and talented direct descendants of the Lu family and sent them to Gu Zhan. On the surface, it was said that Gu Zhan felt lonely and that it would be more lively with the children, but in reality, it was to be friendly to the future crown prince.
Since Jiang?
Ge was stingy and refused to give Gu Zhan real power and honor. She used her own schemes to get it. The children were young and easy to control. Compared to Jiang, Ge was much better. At the same time, it gave Gu Zhan a greater sense of security. Lu Heng sneered. These old fellows were really old. Otherwise, how could they be so naive and ridiculous? No matter how much Lu Shi hated the bastard, he was still his biological son. If he really had the family business, why would he pass it on to someone else's child? Moreover, Jiang? Ge was not dead yet. Lu Heng knew very well that once these old fellows were exposed, they would definitely not be a match for his cousin, Lu Shi. You can continue to daydream. Don't drag your family to death with you, the elder said. The elder said, whether you believe it or not, the assassination was not ordered by us. They had plots and calculations, but they would also wait for the right time. How could they do it without thinking? Lu Heng saw that their reactions did not seem to be fake. His heart gradually sank. If it was not these old fellows who ordered the Lu family to arrange the pawns, then who could it be? It was impossible for the pawns to assassinate Jiang without any instructions. Ge was not complaining that his name was too long. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. We must get rid of the Lu family. Lu Heng took a deep breath. If it did not work, he could only cut off his tail to survive. At the same time, the other families were also confused. This was because Lu Heng had sent people to investigate and found that the pawns arranged by the Lu family had also contacted several other families. Although those families did not know about this, they were framed just like that. Who exactly framed the Lu family could not be found out. What a joke.
Jiang?
Ge had directed and acted out such a good show. Of course, he would not leave a bug for others to turn the tables. After playing people to death in one go, how could he give people a chance to turn the tables? Apart from these families, the families that had secretly extended their claws into the Golden Scale Academy were also afraid. Some people were terrified as soon as they heard the news, but there were also people who held the idea of taking a gamble and turning a bicycle into a motorcycle. What if Jiang Ji didn't find out about them?
They had spent a lot of energy and money to buy and nurture the hidden pawns. It would be a pity to give up just like that. Because of this little bit of thinking, they brought a fatal disaster upon themselves. After a few more days, the graduation exams for the students of the Golden Scale Academy were all over. Because of Jiang? Ji Yi's assassination had caused too much of a ruckus. No one dared to cause trouble for the rest of the exams, and this year's graduation exams were successfully completed. The final results would only be out in a few days, followed by the graduation ceremony. Do you think the Lanting Guild won't appear on that day? The students discussed in private. They hoped that Jiang Yi would appear. Ji Yi would appear to give them more weight, but they were afraid of another assassination. It's hard to say. These days, Wanzhou is in a state of panic. The atmosphere at home is heavy and tense. I don't even want to go back.
Jiang?
As long as Ji Yi didn't appear in front of the public, they wouldn't know the specific situation. Until the day the results were released, there was an earth-shattering development. Chongqing ran to the Feng mansion early in the morning to find Feng Yi. The latter had just finished breakfast and was practicing boxing. Brother Rongli, what day is it today? You still have the leisure to practice boxing? If you don't go now, you won't be able to squeeze in later. Chongqing grabbed Feng Yi's hand and pulled him out. She nagged, the results are released today. Brother Rongli, aren't you curious? Feng Yi was rather relaxed. He said, what's the hurry? Sooner or later, the scores won't change. Today was the day the results were released. It would be uncomfortable for them to squeeze in with the crowd. It would be better to wait for the crowd to disperse before going. Chongqing stomped her feet angrily. I'm worried about Brother Rongli. I want to be the first to know. Feng Yi smiled. But I don't want the precious Chongqing to waste her energy squeezing in with the crowd. I'll go with you after lunch. Under Feng Yi's comfort, Chongqing managed to calm down. The two of them hadn't said a few words when Sun Lan hurried over. Did Lan also ask me to see the results? Sun Lan walked as if she was flying. She had not even caught her breath. What results? Something big happened. Feng Yi said, what happened? Sun Lan said, Lord Lanting woke up. That's a good thing. Sun Lan said, if that's the case, it's certainly a good thing. But Lord Lanting. Sigh, I don't even know how to address him now. Feng Yi and Zhang were at a loss. How to address him? Naturally, it was Lord Lanting. Soon, Feng Yi knew why Sun Lan said that. Last night, in the middle of the night, Lord Lanting, who was rumored to be seriously injured and in a coma, woke up. As a woman with a mythical aura, Jiang Yi was able to turn misfortune into fortune. This was also the reason why Jiang Yi could turn misfortune into fortune this time. During the days she was in a coma, Jiang Yi met her teacher in her dream. In her dream, Ji Yunshu met her teacher, the legendary immortal who had given her the divine book. The old immortal told her who had sent the assassins to kill her at the drill ground. The two of them talked for a few days, but they still wanted more. Finally, the old immortal said to her with pity, if you don't wake up now, I'm afraid you won't wake up. Master, what do you mean? Just as Lord Lanting finished speaking, the old immortal swept her away with a gust of wind. After a while, she woke up. When she woke up, she found arsenic in the ointment brought by the maid. If the old immortal had not woken her up, she would not have woken up again. He captured the maid and interrogated her. After following the clues, he found out that the maid was arranged by Gu Zhan's mistress. Naturally, Lord Lanting did not believe it. He sent people to investigate his mistress and found out that she was indeed disloyal. Since then, Lord Lanting was dubious about the contents of the dream. He sent people to follow the clues and found out that the content was exactly the same as what the old immortal said. According to the information, the Lu family and Gu Zhan's mistress were not the only ones involved. There were also a few other families. All of them had concrete proof. Forget about the others, his own family was also plotting against her. His mistress also wanted her dead. Lord Lanting was disheartened and lamented that there was no place in this vast world that could accommodate her. The old immortal appeared in his dream again and said that she was a child bestowed by heaven. He gave her the surname Jiang and the name ? What?
Ji?
Hearing this news, the three Feng brothers looked at each other.
Jiang?
Ji.
You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.